Hey, warm from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got a great podcast for you guys. Joining me in segment number 2, we're going to have Curtis Rogers aboard. He does absolutely amazing work over at 710 Seattle Sports. He's going to be chatting with me about what we've seen here in the early part of the season, get a little bit of reaction of what we've seen out of some of these West Coast teams as well. Look forward to some of the big matchups that we're getting, not just on Wednesday, but for the entirety of the week. So we're going to have a great time chatting it up with them. Now, this first segment is only going to be about 8 to 10 minutes because of Greg Peterson Experience. That is from 9 to midnight Pacific time, midnight to 3 Eastern time. So do be mindful of that. And it's a case where I had to simulate a lot of these results and everything like that. And you've got 2.5 hours of analysis. So this is going to be a short first segment. But in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every single game on the college basketball betting board for this Wednesday. As we had some bank shots because of the time of recording, I did have to sort of simulate both results and give my handicap one way or the other because there are some TBD matchups with just the nature of these tournaments. So do be mindful of that. And if you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not really get into any Twitter questions today other than, will I get my head out of my rear with regards to these DK Network write-up picks? And the answer is, I hope so. I apologize that I'm currently riding a 5-game losing streak on those. I will do my best. Trust me, the hours are being put in, and it's just been me being garbage. So we are going to try to rectify that for you guys. So let's take a look back at everything that we've gotten here from late Monday into Tuesday. Try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
And I'm sure most of you guys are bettors. You know that when it rains, it pours, because one of those write-up losses was the game that lingered into early Tuesday morning with having the Cal money line and UTEP hitting a buzzer 3 at the end to sink that one 75-72. As for Cal, they were able to weasel their way back into this game after they got off to a rough start, and this was a game just marred by fouls. I mean, these two teams went a combined 50 out of, I believe, 63 at the free throw line. Cal did get worked on the glass quite a bit as UTEP had 16 offensive rebounds, and for Cal, 21 turnovers. That just can't happen. But Fardaws Amick, 18 points, 11 rebounds. Jalen Cohen, it's a 3 with a few seconds remaining, and then UTEP with Tay Hardy, he decided to call game, and that was rough to say the least. So we'll look to bounce back from that. And then you had Texas Southern, who I was fading. They gave their best performance of the year. They come up just short against Oral Roberts, as Oral Roberts, they get it done, but they do not come close to covering, whether that be 8.5, 9.5, or 10.5. I counted 65-63. As for Texas Southern, they entered into this game shooting about 20.5% for 3. They go 8 of 18 from 3-point range, with Deion Stroud being able to put in their 20 points. And for Oral Roberts, very slow going. They were down double figures at the half. They were able to claw their way back to win behind Isaac McBride, who had 23 points, but certainly too little too late with regards to the spread. And we've been noticing a lot of these favorites have been having a little bit of a tougher time covering recently. Like Auburn was a 32.5 point favorite against Alabama A&M. They certainly get the job done outright on the money line, but they were unable to cover that number. This one by a count of 84-54. Certainly this was a bigger number in general, but I mean, if you laid the points with Auburn, this was legitimately rough. They were up 64-21 at one point in this game. Heck, they were up 80-47 with under 3 minutes remaining. It looked like they were still going to be in cover territory, but Alabama A&M able to do just enough to be able to hang around. For Auburn, you did have a very nice performance, by the way, off the bench. You had 15 points, 4 boards out of Chaney Johnson. This is a team that's very, very deep, so I do like them moving forward, but that was a little bit of a rough one. One of the top cover teams in all of college basketball, though, they were able to help alleviate some of the doldrums, as you had Hofstra be able to get the job done against Wright State. This by a count of 85-76 for Wright State. They just were not the right side, as they were up 10 at the half, and then Hofstra able to storm their way back. Tyler Thomas puts in their 30 big points, and Wright State loses despite going 9 of 18 from 3-point range. Wright State currently finds themselves in the bottom 25 in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and the big key for Hofstra, Jaco Fritz, who just has not done a lot to begin the season, He puts in there 14 points, 9 boards. He was tremendous for that Hofstra bunch. You saw UAB get a close win on the road against Middle Tennessee by a count of 58-57. That one was certainly exciting. And then if you're taking a look at big numbers, Duke, they were able to cover one against LaSalle. This by a count of 95-66 as Duke on the closing line. They were laying about 25.5 points, and this was very much a nip-and-tuck game in the final few minutes, but Duke was able to put it away, and with regards to the spread, it was a nip-and-tuck game. Not necessarily the outright result, but Tyrese Proctor, he looked like the All-American candidate that we were talking up coming into the season. 22 points, 7 boards, 4 assists. Love what I saw out of him. He was able to bury a few threes, and for Duke, they do go 9 of 22 from three-point range, and for LaSalle, the Explorers, they were exploring the bottom of the basket. They went 6 of 24 from three-point range. Anwar Gill was able to chip in their 17, but a little bit of a rough situation for them. This was also a little bit of a rough situation as well. Syracuse scores just 57 points against Gonzaga. Gonzaga actually looks a little bit improved on defense this year, 76-57, and for Syracuse, they got 3 of 24 from three-point range. Judah Mintz went 2 of 5 from distance, which means the rest of the team 1 of 19 from three-point range. As for Gonzaga, Noah Nickman was able to put in their 19 points. He had a double-double out of both Anton Watson and Graham Ike, so both of them looking very solid down low. And this was not solid from Colorado. They lose to Florida State by a count of 77-71. For Colorado, to go just 5 of 21 from three-point range. You did have Eddie Lampkin be able to supply 11 rebounds. And for Colorado, they dominated the glass. They won that battle 46-38, but also for Colorado, 20 turnovers. Tristan Da Silva, 6 turnovers and 8 points. That's just not going to cut it. And for Florida State, they were able to get a nice double-double out of Jameer Watkins. He has come in, and he has been a difference maker for the team. 18 points, 11 rebounds. So going to be interesting to watch Florida State moving forward as they win this game despite going 8 of 24 from 3, and really their forte is three-point shooting. I'm doing this as there's about 2 minutes remaining in the Purdue versus Tennessee game. As I do this, Purdue is at the free throw line, up 3, and they're looking to extend it. This has been very much a defensive struggle that we were anticipating, but very much marred by free throws. As I record this with 2 minutes remaining, a combined 70 free throw attempts in this game, so you need to see that, but Zach Edey has been able to deliver a double-double, and I was a little bit concerned as to whether or not you were going to be seeing Toby Awaka out there on the floor. He actually fouled out of this game, so he was able to play a full allotment of minutes for Tennessee, who, as of right now, 7 of 26 from three-point range, and that's always what you fear out of the Tennessee team, just those spells of scoring that come at the worst time. And with regards to spells of scoring, we have not seen a ton thus far this season, as the overs, they have been hot in college basketball, but it's starting to come back to the unders. Overall for the season, 370 overs, 361 unders, and if you're taking a look in terms of pushes, I believe that we are up to 8. Meanwhile, favorites, they're still doing a relatively solid job against the spread. 377, 351, and 11. Meanwhile, home underdogs, 70, 76, and 3 against the spread. I do think that home underdogs going to have a lot of value moving forward. And if you're looking at the last 7 days, about 52.9% of games have went under the total. 180 unders, 160 overs, and along the way, I think that we've gotten 5 pushes in there as well. So that's what we're all seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Tuesday. Sorry I did have to cut this a little bit short, just running short on time for the Greg Peterson experience and running short on time to be able to get an interview in with Curtis Rogers. He does tremendous work over at 710 Seattle Sports. We're going to be taking a look at the West Coast landscape. We're going to be taking a look at some of the marquee games that we're going to be seeing the next few days, and some of the teams that are impressing him thus far. That's up next right here on Cooks Got Soups with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beeson Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cooks Got Soups with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beeson Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by this man as we've got Curtis Rogers aboard. He does tremendous work over at 710 Seattle Sports. That is out there doing a great job taking a look at everything in the Pacific Northwest, from the Seattle Seahawks, who they're very much in a playoff run, the Seattle Kraken, the Gonzaga Bulldogs, the Washington Huskies, who both in basketball and football are a hot-button team right now. And to be able to follow Curtis on Twitter and Instagram. That is at a kid from Kent altogether, as he also does the Seattle Sports Night, Seattle Sports Saturday podcast as well. And Curtis, always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Greg, love coming on with you. And during college basketball season, one of my favorite conversations I have with you is the one we have right around Thanksgiving, because this is when everything really ramps up around college basketball. Yeah, you get the one-off, non-conference games that we've seen, over the first couple weeks of the season. But it's feast week. You've got the Maui Invitational. You've got all sorts of other tournaments going on around college basketball. This is just an absolutely glorious slate of games we've got going on right now, and then also through the rest of the week. I can't wait to get into it with you.
Yeah, I cannot wait either. And with regards to what we've seen the first 2 weeks of the season, before we do dive in on some of these tournaments, have there really been any particulars that have stood out, whether that be just the pace of play that we've been seeing, the upsets / the lack thereof upsets? What has really stood out to you from the first 2 weeks of the college basketball season?
Yeah, everything's kind of gone chalk so far with the top teams. Obviously Duke, their loss to Arizona at Cameron Indoor was probably the biggest loss of any team early on atop the bracket or atop the rankings. But other than that, it just has not really been too many jaw-dropping upsets or just stunning results so far. I got to give a shout out to Bryant University, who fired their head coach right before the season started. Phil Martelli Jr. steps in, and they have a massive, massive win. Shout out to them for getting the job done. That one was a really fun game late last week. But I look at this college basketball season right now. It's going to be a lot of fun seeing which teams are able to kind of withstand the early portion of the season here, especially in that Maui Invitational that has such a stacked field. That Bryant win over Florida Atlantic, last year's tournament darling. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to see just kind of how these teams that have not been super battle-tested yet, see a huge increase in quality of opponent here, specifically that Maui Invitational.
Yeah, the Maui Invitational is going to be just absolutely tremendous. And with regards to the Gonzaga versus Syracuse game for Tuesday, we are recording this as we do not know the result of that one. But what did you make out of Gonzaga's first game as they fell to Purdue and they were not able to cover the spread on my side of things? But I actually felt very encouraged by Gonzaga watching that, especially Graham Ike being able to show some range.
Yeah, that was surprising to me. 6 3-point attempts from Ike. Not a guy who's really known to take it out by the three-point arc. He was 6 of 10 from the field. Anton Watson, 4 of 10. Those guys had a really tough challenge going up against Zach Edey and that Purdue front line. I thought they held their own. Gonzaga's backcourt, to me, was kind of the difference in this one. Nolan Hickman and Ryan Nembhard, they combined to go 10 of 31 and just 2 of 12 from the three-point line. If either one of those guys get a couple more shots to go, maybe this game's a lot closer than what it turned out to be. But right now, I think Gonzaga is kind of looking for that guy that can kind of put the ball in the bucket at a moment's notice. I think Ryan Nembhard is going to be hopefully that guy for them this season, but you don't have the Julian Strothers anymore. You don't have the Drew Timmies anymore. You don't have the Chet Holmgrens. You don't have those Corey Kisperts, the Jalen Suggs, the guys who can get a shot off at any point in the game. They're going to have to run things through their offense a lot this season, at least in the early goings before someone emerges. And I kind of look at that second half where things kind of fell apart, outscored by 15 against a very, very veteran Purdue team. Obviously, Zach Edey, he's going to eat against any team, 25 and 14, showing why he was the National Player of the Year last year. Just a tremendous performance from him. He could very easily win back-to-back National Player of the Year awards. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility at all. He is just as advertised coming into this season. So I think Gonzaga, they got to find that guy who can get a bucket at a moment's notice. If they can do that, I think they're going to be, back to where they've always been. That WCC, though, Greg, St. Mary's off to a very slow start this season. So I wonder if Gonzaga is going to get the challenge from them as much as they've had in years past.
Yeah, I do think that it is going to be interesting to take a look at that moving forward. As joining me on the show, we do have Curtis Rogers, who does tremendous work over at 710 Seattle Sports, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and the main challenger for Gonzaga the last few years in the WCC and figures to be moving forward is St. Mary's, but they really took it on the chin out here in lovely Las Vegas over the weekend, and I do want to get your thoughts there because I thought this might be the closest WCC race that we've seen in quite some time. And even though Gonzaga loses on Monday, that loss to Purdue, I feel like there's no shame in that. What has happened the last 3 games against for St. Mary's, though, quite a bit of shame there. Losing at home to Weber State, just getting completely dump-trucked in their games out here in Las Vegas. I'm pretty concerned about the St. Mary's team right now, as right now they have no offense to speak of.
Yeah, their offense has been just absolutely brutal this season. I think Connor Hope tweeted out a really interesting stat about just how bad things have gotten for St. Mary's offense to start this season. They are averaging 1.196 points per minute, or about 47.8 points per game. And Houston, who has the number one ranked defense according to Ken Pom, they are only allowing 49.5 points per game. So Weber State's offense right now is worse than the best defense in college basketball. That can't continue if they want to get back to the NCAA tournament, if they want to be the best challenger to Gonzaga in the West Coast Conference. Those three losses, I mean, one of those losses I think would cause red flags, but three of them already, the 25-point loss to San Diego State, 17-point loss to Xavier. I mean, San Diego State's not the same team that they were last year. They lost a lot of talent. Same with Xavier, down with Zach Fremantle right now. Those two teams are not what they were a year ago, and yet St. Mary's just could not put up a fight in either one of them. Now, it is early. We will say that about just about every team right now that's struggling. There is still time to dig out. But with a team like St. Mary's, where if you don't win the West Coast Conference, you have to be near perfect in the non-conference slate of games if you want to take away one of those at-large bids. Now, obviously, you want to get those wins against San Diego State and Xavier, but the loss to Weber State, that one I think is going to hurt them in a big way. And I just hope that they're able to kind of right the ship here, because these games that they lose right now could have an even bigger impact than anything that they lose in the West Coast Conference.
Yeah, absolutely. When you play in a mid-major conference, you have to really take advantage of these games in November/December, because a lot of people on Selection Sunday for the Power Conference teams will be like, I think we can throw away what happened in November/December. But when you're playing against some of these lesser teams, you're not going to get as many of those opportunities if you're St. Mary's and if you're Gonzaga. But I do want to talk about that a little bit more as well, because with the WCC, certainly this is not going to be like some sort of a power conference or anything like that, but I actually feel really good about what I've seen out of a lot of these teams. Santa Clara was able to pull off a nice win against Stanford. They won an exhibition prior to the season against UCLA. San Francisco, that loss against Grand Canyon was rough, but I liked what I saw out of them as well. You've got a lot of teams in this conference in general putting up a good fight. LMU is a team that I like what I'm seeing out of them. I do feel like this is a WCC that certainly the wins that Gonzaga and St. Mary's pick up won't do a ton for the resume or anything like that, but I do feel like the overall depth and the overall competition in the WCC feels like it's better than it has been in past years.
Yeah, and even another team to watch out for, at least getting, some pretty decent results early on. They did have the loss to UC Davis and a loss to UNLV, is Pepperdine. And how about the contributions of Michael Ajayi? Averaging 17 and 11 to start this season, poured in 31 against UNLV on 12 of 18 shooting, 27 points against Lafayette on November 12th on 11 of 19 shooting. That's a guy that is putting up some pretty eye-popping numbers to start this season. Those are definitely all WCC numbers for sure. That's somebody to keep an eye on in the WCC to start this season. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting battle. I think, we all know it's pretty much everybody's playing for second place in that conference. But which teams are going to emerge? Is St. Mary's, for sure going to have a down season this season? I still have faith in them. I still have faith in Randy Bennett being able to kind of dig themselves out, just because they've done it so often. Santa Clara, they've had a ton of NBA talent come through their program over the last couple of seasons. Haven't necessarily translated to a lot of wins and losses. And then there's going to be other opportunities in this conference this year because BYU has left. They've gone to the Big 12. So now it's the classic WCC. It's your father's WCC. It's all these teams that we've come to know and love. BYU never really felt at home in the West Coast Conference. They're gone now, so now it's got a really classic look to it. That's one less quality opponent in the conference. So like we talked about, every game just kind of amplifies in importance for all these teams not named Gonzaga. You can't really afford to slip up out of conference play right now. If you do, you better make it up big time in conference play.
Yeah, but you certainly do need to, because these games are so important, as our good friend Curtis Rogers of 710 Seattle Sports knows, and he has joined me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And certainly what we do see in Maui is going to be a big-time intrigue. And with regards to one of the other games that we are going to be seeing out there, we know that we're going to be getting Tennessee going up against Purdue. We saw Purdue have a bit of a struggle against Gonzaga in the first half. They were able to pull away in the second half. And for Tennessee, really up until the final 3 minutes. And I took 14 points with Syracuse. They were down 5 with less than 3 minutes remaining. So I am very salty about that loss. But that said, with Tennessee, they had their issues as well. What do you make out of this matchup? Because these are two classic defensive teams that thus far this season, they have looked better on offense, but I think both of these teams get back to their roots. Both of these teams start to just play a little bit more of a slog, a little bit of a slow style in general, but I'm a little bit concerned that on the Tennessee side for one of their big men in Awaka, he only played 1 minute yesterday, and in my opinion, Tennessee needs all the size humanly possible going up against giant of the earth Zach Edey.
Yeah, Tennessee ran a very guard-heavy lineup against Syracuse, and it worked to their benefit, pulling away at the end. But like you said, Zach Edey causes so many matchup nightmares. This is a Tennessee team that needs all the size that they can get. You mentioned Awaka getting the 1 minute of playing time. JP Estrella is a 6'7". He's a 6'11" freshman. This is his first action at the college level. You're going to need some good minutes out of him too, I think. Jonas Aidu, he looked really good, though, in that game against Syracuse, going for 14 and 11, getting 9 boards on the defensive glass there. Can't let Zach Edey, eat you alive on the boards, because if you do that, it's going to be a long night for you. Tennessee last year, the best defensive team in the country, Rick Barnes, had those guys playing out of their minds on the defensive side of the ball. These two teams, I would expect them to go pretty far in the NCAA tournament. I'm looking at both of them as potential Sweet 16 teams. Obviously with Purdue being as high as they are in the top 25 right now, you're looking at national championship aspirations for sure. But I think both these teams can definitely advance pretty far in the NCAA tournament, and we're going to get a nice little taste of that coming up here this week.
Oh, I am right there with you. I do think that we are going to be getting a very, very good treat on Tuesday with that matchup, and I do think in general we are set for some really good basketball. I do want to get your thoughts on a team that has been getting a lot of hype on the West Coast coming into the season, but they haven't quite delivered, because we were talking a little bit about St. Mary's and the way that they struggled. One of the few teams that St. Mary's has defeated thus far, that'd be New Mexico, and they're right here in my neck of the woods. They're going to be playing 10 minutes away from me in Henderson, Nevada. What have you made out of this New Mexico team? Because they've been without Jalen House the last few games, and even if he plays, I don't think he's going to be 100%. And going up against a Toledo team that's able to run it and gun it, if they don't have not just Jalen House out there on the floor, but a fully healthy Jalen House out there on the floor, I think this could be another loss that New Mexico, quite frankly, can't withstand.
Yeah, they would be tough. They're getting a lot of good contributions, though. Donovan Dent, Jamal Mashburn Jr., JT Toppin. I mean, those three guys have played very well to start this season. But like you said, just an interesting go of it for New Mexico. How about looking at New Mexico's roster? They got, 6th or 7th year senior Jamal Baker, who is at his 4th stop in college basketball. He was at Kentucky, Arizona. He was at, I believe, UNLV, and then now he's at New Mexico. Jamal Mashburn going 29 points last game against UT Arlington. But yeah, that one against Toledo, that's going to be just a crazy, crazy offensive game going on there. I look at New Mexico's non-conference slate of games, not a ton of opportunities for them to put up some big-time performances against ranked opponents. That St. Mary's game, their only opportunity right now as it currently stands to get a ranked win. That didn't happen. They lost by 14. So they don't have a very wide margin for error right now. I think New Mexico, though, could really, really use healthy Jalen House. I think they do have the horses right now to keep up offensively, especially with those three guys, Dent, Mashburn, and Toppin. If House can contribute, I mean, we're looking at a New Mexico team that could really have some fun here over the next couple of weeks.
Yep, I think that that's one of the biggest ifs in all of college basketball, because if New Mexico has them out there on the floor, they're a very solid team. Without them, we have seen the results, and it's not necessarily the world's prettiest. And when it comes to what we've all got for what we're getting the next few days, is there anything else in general that you are keeping your eye on? Because I do think that we've got ourselves a bunch of really fun tournaments. We saw like Wisconsin versus Virginia going down on Monday, and I mean, this is just a big bundle of fun in general that we get this time of year. But anything else, any teams, any particular tournaments that are really catching your eye?
Well, we just got the Continental Tire main event there. Washington losing in overtime to San Diego State. I think Washington is a team that has impressed a little bit more than I think I was anticipating. I've got Paul Mulcahy playing some really good minutes at point guard. Moses Wood has been contributing. Keon Brooks, just a lot of guys. Severe Wheeler. This Washington team is under a lot of pressure. They're going to need to build off of this performance that got them, as far as they could go against that San Diego State team, pushing them, losing 197 in overtime. I thought that was a really good start to the season for them, especially picking up that win against Xavier. We'll see how it goes later on because there's just so much pressure on them to play for Mike Hopkins' job, essentially. Definitely worth watching to see how the Huskies can build off of the good early season momentum they've got going. I mean, yeah, they're 3-2, but a respectable loss in that group. And their other loss this year was Nevada. Nevada is always a team that's competitive for sure. So they don't have any bad gut punch losses so far. So hopefully they can continue that and play some competitive ball this year.
Yeah, they very nearly pulled off that win against San Diego State, which how San Diego State blew that lead in the final minute to force overtime, that's not great to say the least. But, man, with Washington, it's been really intriguing because they took a bad loss to Nevada. But all of a sudden, I think we're realizing this Nevada team actually might be really, really stinking good as well. So we've got a lot of fun coming up. And, Curtis, I know you do such a tremendous job taking a look at this game that we all know and love. And I know you're dialed in when it comes to college hoop season. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram, or X and Instagram, at a kid from Kent, and seattlesports.com is the place to be if you want to download any content right there. And Google, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify are where you can find all sorts of podcasts that I'm a part of. And yeah, Greg, always have a blast talking college hoops with you, especially this time of year. Feast week is here, and it's going to be a lot of fun this college basketball season.
Oh, it is a ton of fun, and it is always a ton of fun to be able to talk with our good friend Curtis Rogers. He does such an incredible job taking a look at this game that we all know and love. It's just a wealth of knowledge in general on this front. So big thanks to Curtis for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Apes Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Curtis Rogers. He does tremendous work over at 710 Seattle Sports, taking a look at everything that's happening out there in the Pacific Northwest. I know that for those of you guys that listen to my baseball podcast, you heard him quite a bit during the season as he does a great job with the Seattle Mariners pre- and post-game hosting duties. He does a great job taking a look at the Washington Huskies. He does amazing work when it comes to just all of college basketball. You name it, he does it. 5-tool player. Always great to be able to get Curtis support. Big thanks to him for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at unit_81, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games with 3 digits on the rotation first, and then it pretty much goes by order of tip time with regards to these non-conference / these neutral court tournaments in general. Like the Maui Invitational will be closer to the bottom, while the Gulf Coast Classic is closer to the top. It's very, very convoluted. It makes things very difficult, to say the least. But that said, we are having ourselves just a bundle full of fun, and we do have ourselves some tremendous action. So let's get it started with a neutral court game. This is 671, 672 on the betting board. You got Appalachian St, and they are going to be playing against Murray State. Murray State is finding themselves as a 2.5-point underdog on the open. Total on this game is 145, and this is a tight line and one that's only currently up at DraftKings because both of these teams played yesterday, so a lot of books will hold off on putting up numbers on these back-to-backs until the early AM, so do be mindful of that as well. But at this number, I'd be willing to take the 2.5 with Murray State. I set Appalachian State as a 2-point favorite, and with Appalachian State, this team does a very solid job with their defense. They always are one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball in terms of their tempo, but I do like what Murray State has coming back to the table after last season. Just was a little bit of a rough year in general. With Murray State, you've got Rob Perry back at the backcourt, a nice double-figure scorer, and he's able to work very well with Jacoby Wood, who came over from Belmont this year. He has been able to give out about 4.8 assists, to in the neighborhood favored about 1.8 turnovers per contest. You've had Wood currently shoot 60% from three-point range. That should be seeing a little bit of a fall off for his career, more of a 33 to 34% three-point shooter. But what really fortifies this Murray State team is what they've been able to get down low out of Nick Ellington. He transfers in from Eastern Illinois, and I was not expecting him to have the impact that he has, as at Eastern Illinois last year I had like 7.5 points, 4.5 boards, block per contest, but he was just surrounded by absolutely nothing whatsoever on that team, and all of a sudden he's been a much better low-post player this season, and you do have quite a few guys that are able to go bombs away from the outside. As Murray State currently shooting 37.5% from three-point range, being able to have someone like a Brian Moore Jr. step up after he was a part-time starter season ago has been big, and for Appalachian St, they are going to be able to control the glass with Justin Abson, who last season was able to give the team 2.2 blocks per contest. He's currently averaging right around 10 rebounds per game, so he is going to own that aspect of it, but you do have to be wondering who's going to be able to help out in the backcourt, because you've been able to have some good facilitation out of Xavier Brown, who has been able to dish out about 3.5 assists per contest. He's also averaging fewer than 2 points per contest. I know that there's being a pass first guy, but you'd like to see a little bit more scoring pop than that. Donovan Gregory, CJ Mantis, these are a pair of guys that are chipping in there about 27, 28 points per contest. And overall for Appalachian State, they have been able to shoot about 32% from three-point range. You do have your fear with App State blowing this game at the free throw line as well. Currently, they're shooting below 60% at the free throw line. That should be going northward, but even last year, they shot 67.5% at the free throw line. If you're in a one-possession game, and I believe that it was costly for them against Oregon State, that can be a case where that is the ultimate difference maker. Murray State, they come in having lost 2 straight, but single-digit game against Western Kentucky and the tight line against UNC Wilmington came into play because they had lost that game by 2. So I do think that Murray State holds up on the glass. I like what they've got in the backcourt, so being able to get north of 2, I'm going to be taking a look at Murray State, and did set my total at a 142 as Appalachian State, one of the more defense-oriented and slower teams in all of college basketball. So diving in on the under and looking at 2+ with Murray State, 673, 674 on the betting board. Little Rock is playing those to Georgia State. Georgia State is a favorite of 1.5 points. Totals between 158 and 159, and I did set Little Rock as my favorite of 1.5 points. So going to be taking a look at old Little Rock outright on the money line with this Little Rock team. He did a nice job of bringing in some nice pieces via the transfer portal. You've got a little bit of a regime change, and you're bringing in Jameer Chaplin, who's been rock solid over at South Florida the last few seasons, plays some solid defense. Now, not a guy that's going to really shoot it well from 3, and that is the main kryptonite that you do have with this Little Rock team. Enter into this one shooting about 25.5% from 3. They'll shoot better than 25.5% from 3. The question is how much. Jordan Jefferson, season ago, was able to shoot about 39% from 3. He's been able to give the team about 6.5 points, 3.5 boards per contest thus far this season. But what I do like for this team as well is what you've been able to get out of D'Antoni Gordon. He's stuck with the regime change. He, a season ago, was a nice starter with 13.5 points, 5.5 boards, steal per contest. Once again, not a guy that goes bombs away from three-point range, but all in all, I do like these pieces that have come in for Little Rock. Meanwhile, for Georgia State, this was a brutal team against the spread a season ago, and they're doing a better job of taking care of the ball. Just 8.5 turnovers per game thus far this season. After that, it was more like 13 per contest a season ago, and last year, they were one of the worst three-point shooting teams in college basketball, 29.5%. It's a little bit better. They're shooting just north of 30% from 3. Lucas Taylor has been able to make a nice impact after he began his career at Wake Forest, shooting about 31% from 3, but 16 points per contest out of him. They have fortified things a little bit down low at Leslie and Carrium. Comes in from the Big South where he was averaging 5+ boards per contest. And Jaden Turner down for what? He last season over at Queens NC at 8.5 points, 7.5 boards. He's been able to do a good job of hitting the glass, but this team does have their deficiencies on offense. You do have Dwan Odom currently shooting 66% from 3. Last year shot below 30% from 3. He's been able to give the team 11 points. 4 assists. He pretty much does everything except for show range. I do think that and 3-point shooting percentage going to be going downward, and I do think that Little Rock going to be able to force some steals here. They've been able to get about 7 per contest, and this is a rematch of a game that we saw just a few days ago on the road against Georgia State. Little Rock lost that game by kind of 88-77, a game where they shot just 5 of 24 from 3-point range, as you had Cougar Downing go 5 of 10 from 3-point range, and the rest of the team went 0 of 14. The rest of the team doesn't go 0 of 14. There's a possibility that they win that game, and I do think that things will iron out. I did set my total at a 156. I think things get slowed down just a little bit in this one, and that was a little bit of a product of fouls in general, with both teams taking a combined 61 free throws. So going to be taking a look at the under semi-total 156, and Little Rock, I think, gets their revenge, taking them out right on the money line. 675, 676 on the betting board. It is Texas State, and they're going to be playing against Southern Utah. A neutral court game that sees Texas State as a 3.5-point favorite, and your total on this game, it is 144, and with old Texas State, I did set them as a 2-point underdog. I'm going to be taking a look at Southern Utah right on the money line. Southern Utah going through quite a bit of a regime change. Rob Jeter is now in the fold, and he's been able to do a nice job of being able to get Zion Young online, as Zion Young actually played for him over at Western Illinois many years ago during that 2019-20 season. Shot 41% from three with 13 points per contest. Ever since then, he's had a big giant fall off, but this year he looks to be back in full force. Currently logging about 14 points, a little bit north of 5 rebounds as a 6'4" do-it-all player that's able to go bombs away from three-point range. So you do like to see that for Southern Utah. They don't have one true, amazing rebounder, but you've got pretty much 4 guys on the roster giving you at least 4.7 rebounds per contest, including Prophet Johnson, who's been able to give you about 14 points per contest, chipping in there about 4.5 boards. Braden Housley has come in, and he's been a nice contributor with about 13 points per contest. He's a true freshman that has been able to surprise quite a few people. And then on the flip side for the Texas State team, you do have Brandon Love, who down low has been very solid. He's been able to give this team about 8 boards per contest. But for Texas State, they're currently dealing with an injury to Tyrell Morgan. He had 16 rebounds in the first 2 games of the season, and last season he was one of their best players with 9 points, 6 boards. He was the main holdover after they lost Mason Harrell from a season ago, so that really sets this team back, and that does mean that they have to look to their guards a little bit more, like Dylan Dawson, who's been able to give you about 7.5 points per contest. He all of a sudden needs to kick it into high gear, and we saw him in his first few years in the college basketball level shoot north of 40% from three-point range, but on a higher usage role, he just has not been able to duplicate that. You've got Chris Nix, who comes in from UT Martin, where he was a very solid player. He's averaging about 6.5, 7 points per contest, 5 boards. He's just become a complete afterthought for this team. Texas State just seems to be very poorly run in general. They're shooting less than 30% from three-point range. They're turning the ball over north of 15 times per game. Josh O'Gara comes in from San Jose State, where he was an afterthought. They're needing to rely upon him. Texas State, they've got their clear, slow, and controlled style. You've got a Southern Utah team that is looking to crank up the tempo, so this is a situation of something's got to give. Now, personally, I did set my total at a 140. I do think that because both of these teams played a lot of basketball last few days, or in unfamiliar surroundings, it does cause for the shooting to go downward a little bit, and neither of these teams shooting it amazingly, so going to be diving in on the under. And with Southern Utah, we'll take them right on the money line. 677, 678 on the betting board. It is Temple. We give our to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls. They play us to Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a 1.5 to a 2-point favorite. Your total is between 136.5 and 137. I set my line at a 1.5. So at 2 or more, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Temple. Don't necessarily want them outright on the money line. I was burnt the last time I tried to lay a big number with Temple, so that was not necessarily too terrific. But what is pretty terrific for this Temple team is what you've been able to get out of Hyseer Miller, who's been able to chip in there north of 20 points and 4.5 assists per contest. It's a Temple team that is now under the tutelage of Adam Fisher, who was over at Penn State a season ago, and he certainly is trying to get this team to play a little bit more of an exciting brand of basketball, not necessarily drive the ball in too much, but protect it. 9 turnovers per contest, shoot it well from 3, and that's been eluding the team thus far. 32% three-point shooting, but Micah Piccarelli comes in from UMBC. He's been a bright spot, been able to log just under 14 points per contest. He's able to give you 40% from three-point range. Then you've got Jaleel White, who's able to give you 8 rebounds per game, but even though Ole Miss is missing the likes of Musa Cisse, some of those two-time transfers, they have really been decimated by that regard. They still do have guys that have good versatility, like an Allen Flanagan. So able to give you 19 points, 7 boards, was over at Auburn, and was always an effective player, not a great three-point shooter. Seems like this team is going to be really relying upon TJ Caldwell for a little production. Shot less than 30% from 3, but did have a few moments of brightness last season. Thus far this season, 8.5 points, 2 assists, and a steal per contest, and that is one of the things that Ole Miss does very well. They've got pretty much 6 different guys giving you at least a steal per contest, and Jamarian Sharp, giant of the earth, who averaged 4 blocks per game a season ago at 7'5". He's going to cause things to be difficult for this Temple team down low. But with Temple, I do think that they're going to be able to do a solid job taking care of the ball. Jalen Murray sometimes gets a little bit out of sorts, and he's very much an up transfer, was playing over for the St. Peter's Peacocks last 2 seasons where he wasn't even a primary starter. Now he has to run the show over at Ole Miss. Do have some question marks there, so it is a circumstance where I did set my total at 135.5. Chris Beard's teams always preach defense, are always a relatively slow bunch, so I'm going to be taking a look at the under. With Temple getting 2 or more, I'm going to be willing to take them as a home underdog on the spread. 679, 680 on the betting board. Old Dominion plays host Princeton. Princeton is a favorite of between 4 and 4.5 points. 134 to 134.5 is your total, and with Princeton, set them as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm mostly seeing 4s out there, and at a 4, I'm going to be willing to lay it. Got an Old Dominion bunch that does a pretty stellar job with their defense, but the offense, that is a big question mark for this team, because with Old Dominion, you've got a few guys that you're able to rely upon from time to time, but last season, they were shooting sub 33% from three-point range. They're a team that they get a little bit all over the place, and for Old Dominion, one of the big keys for this team is just being able to have Chauncey Jenkins get others in the fold, because he last year had 3 assists per contest with his 13.5 points, 36.5% three-point shooting, and while he's been a great scorer this year with 19 points and 5 boards, he's yet to really pass out the ball too much. Less than an assist and a half per contest. Vashawn Alete has really been one of the main men to try to dole out the ball. Freshman that comes in from Ontario, Canada. He's been able to give you about 3 assists per contest, but does get a little bit loose with it. And for this Princeton team, even though they lose Tucson of Alman, they've got a ton down low, and Caden Pierce give you right now 48 rebounds through the first 4 games of the season, averaging 15 points, 12 boards, 1.8 steals per contest. Princeton always runs, you guessed it, the Princeton-style offense. Does lead to a few more turnovers, but does lead to some open looks as well. The team is shooting 36% from three-point range, with Matt Aloko going Aloko. They're currently shooting 66% from 3. That's going to see a little bit of a fall-off, but I like what you've been able to get out of Blake Peters as well. Pretty much a designated shooter a season ago that was able to chip in their 6 points on 40% three-point shooting. Doesn't do a ton in terms of like rebounding or anything like that, but up to 10.5 points per contest this season for Old Dominion. I just don't know if they've got the sheer depth to be able to match up. I like what RJ Blakeney is able to bring to the table. Comes in from Dayton. He's been able to give the team right around 9 points, 4.5 boards per contest, and currently Old Dominion is shooting 38% from 3, but they are also turning the ball over 14 times per contest as a team that plays a little bit lower tempo, and they just don't necessarily have a ton down low. They've been looking to Tyrone Williams, 6'5", do-it-all player that comes in from Oregon to really be pounding the glass, but their lack of size against a Princeton team has been able to do a great job of being able to haul the ball down low, and a Princeton team that, under the guidance of Xavion Lee as a floor general, has been able to cut down on the turnovers. I do think that Princeton gets it done in a little bit more of a low-scoring slog. I did set my total 134.5. Right now, seeing mostly 134. At the 134, it's my max I'm willing to take over, because I do think that if you have a game this site, you are going to be getting some late game fouling, so looking at the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 4 with Princeton. 681, 682 on the betting board. Air Force, they play us a VMI. VMI is an underdog of between 13.5 and 12.5 points. And your total on this game is anywhere between 137.5 and 138. I made VMI a 10-point underdog, so I'm going to be looking to take the points with VMI. Defense has been a massive concern for this team. They're coming off of a season in which they were in the bottom 5 in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They look to be a little bit better this year. I'm not saying they're remarkably better, and when you're playing against the likes of South Dakota, Northern Arizona, and South Carolina, you know what? It's easier to look a little bit better, but they do look a skoge improved with that regard, and I do like what they've been able to get in the front court out of Stefan Olawani. He is a freshman that comes in from Australia. He's been able to come in off the bench. It's given the team 9.5 points, 4.5 boards, and that's big because you were wondering who was going to be able to step up around Trey Shot Jackson, who's been able to log a little bit over 11 boards per contest. Last year shot 37% from three-point range as a 6'6" do-it-all player, and that's allowed him to be able to operate a little bit more along the perimeter, and this team has done a good job of being able to get him the ball with having another gentleman and Brennan Watkins be able to step up. Watkins was a little bit of an afterthought, shot about 34% from 3 with 3 points per contest season ago. He has taken a big leap forward with a little bit over 13 points per game. And VMI, though they don't necessarily have like supreme guys that are going to take over a game, they do have some depth. They are able to go to, if they want, a 9 or so man rotation. Meanwhile, for Air Force, it is all about Ethan Taylor. Ethan Taylor has been tremendous. 20.5 points, 5.5 boards, 3.5 assists, a steal, shooting 40% from three-point range. Shades of what we saw out of A.J. Walker back in the day for this team. So he's really become that guy. The question becomes, what are you going to be able to get around him, for one? And two, what are you going to be able to get in the post? Because right now you've got one player that's giving you north of 5.3 rebounds per game in Kellen Boylan. 6'7" gentleman that, after he did pretty much nothing a season ago, has been able to take those strides forward. I wonder how much that is a flash in the pan, though, because last year you saw Corbin Green have a really good start to the season, and he fell off the face of planet Earth this season. He's averaging like 4 points, 4 boards, just has not been able to give this team a whole heck of a lot of anything. For Air Force, they've been able to do a solid job shooting about 36.5% from three-point range. They always play out one of the most slow and controlled styles in all of college basketball, and that leads to a high amount of variance in their games because they just have a low amount of possessions in general. And if you do take a look at this Air Force team, in regulation, the defense has been quite solid. They did play an overtime game against William & Mary, so if you look at regulation only, they have given up 67 points or fewer in each out of their last 5 games. You've got a VMI team that they have given up at least 74 points in every one of their games against a Division I opponent, so it's a good old situation of something's got to give. I do think that things get slowed down in this one. I do think that VMI is going to be able to do a solid job on glass, so going to be willing to take the points with VMI, set them as a 10-point underdog. And with regards to this total, I'm going to be diving under. Set my total at a 134, 683, 684 on the betting board. Campbell plays those to the Citadel. Citadel is an underdog of 2.5 points. Total on this game is 128. I did set my total at 131. Looking at the over, the Citadel, under the tutelage of Ed Conroy, certainly have slowed down their style from what we saw in the Duggar Bacum days, and I do think that that's very beneficial for them. But here at a 2.5, it's a max I'm willing to lay with Campbell, but I'm willing to lay it. I have these teams as relative equals on a neutral court, and I do think that the home court advantage is going to be playing a big role because the Citadel is going to have the best low post player in this game. That would be Quentin Malora-Brown. Quentin Malora-Brown right now logging about 8.5 boards, a block, in the neighborhood about 7.5 points per game. I like what he's able to bring to the table, but the Citadel is having the three-point shot elude them. They're shooting less than 30% from three-point range. You do have a nice backcourt duo in Elijah Morgan coupled up with A.J. Smith, who have been able to combine for in the neighborhood about 26.5 points per contest, and Morgan is shooting north of 33% from three-point range. But while Malora-Brown is able to dominate things down low for the Citadel, Anthony De La Rosa is able to dominate things in the backcourt. 20 points, 6 rebounds per contest for Campbell, shooting 46% from three-point range. Entering into Tuesday, he was the only player on the roster averaging north of 7 points per contest. He is going to need to get a little bit of help from his friends. We have seen from time to time Jamanias Mokasekis be able to step up a little bit. He, as a freshman, was able to burst onto the scene with right around 5 points per contest. Ever since then, he's been a little bit rudderless as but a 6'7", 6'8" combo player. I do think that you're going to be able to get something down low out of Laurinaitis Vetreus as well. The gentleman from Lithuania was a part-time starter a season ago and shot in the mid-30s from three-point range. I do think that there's a little bit of upside with him as well. With this Campbell team, they're all bought in on the defensive side of things, with De La Rosa being your main scorer for this team, and I do think that that's going to be a little bit of a tough guard for a Citadel team that should be able to win the battle down low, especially with Winston Hill coming in for Presbyterian, giving this team 5 boards per contest. But at the same time, I do think that the backcourt of Campbell wins out. We'll take Campbell at 2.5 or less, set them as a 3-point favorite, and with this total, main mine a 131. So looking at this low total over, I think we get some late game filling here, and going to be willing to lay up to 2.5 with Campbell. 685, 686 on the betting board. Pepperdine and Indiana St do battle from the Dollar Loan Center in Henderson, Nevada, as Pepperdine is a 3-point underdog, and your total on this game is 157.5. I made Indiana State a 4.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. Was very impressed by what we saw out of Indiana State yesterday in that game against Rice, putting up 55 points in the first half. And though Indiana State does have some moving parts, this team was actually a top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They just didn't come off that way because they do play at such an up-tempo pace, but this team is capable of being able to go right around 9 or so deep. You're able to have multiple guys be able to bring up the ball and are able to facilitate. I mean, you had Robbie Avila in the first half yesterday, have 5 assists. He's a versatile 6'10" gentleman that is one of the best passers that you're going to find for someone north of, I would say, 6'8" in all of college basketball. He this season has been able to chip in there north of 16 points, right around about 5 or so boards, 5+ assists per contest. He's really taken some strides forward. You've got a little bit more of an ancillary piece in Jason Kent down low. He's able to give you about 6 or so boards per contest. Xavier Bledson is able to give you a double-figure amount of points. He's able to do a good job of dishing out the ball, and for Pepperdine, you have question marks with this team because Javon Porter has yet to take the floor this season. Javon Porter, the brother of Michael Porter, was a big-time impact player, someone who had 6'8", 6'9", is able to pop it from three-point range. Now, Easton Mallet has been able to give you 20 points per contest, and Michael Ajay has come in from the non-Division I level, and he has absolutely torn it up. He is currently shooting north of 50% from three-point range, entered into yesterday averaging a double-double with 17 points, 11 boards per contest, but Ethan Anderson, it just feels like his play has regressed. Going into last night, was averaging 3.6 assists at 3.4 turnovers per contest. I remember at USC as a freshman, he was giving out north of 4 assists at 2.5 turnovers per game in the Pac-12, all while shooting 38% from three-point range. So he has undoubtedly been all over the place. It does feel like a little bit of a thin team as well. Also, without having Javon Porter in there, Jalen Petrie has been able to give you about 5.5 boards. He was a nice ancillary piece a season ago, but he's certainly not someone that stretches the floor like Porter does, and especially with Indiana State now having a nice go-to guy in Isaiah Swope, who was able to shoot darn near 40% for three-point range, has been able to chip in there well north of 16 points per contest. I do think that it is an uphill battle for Pepperdine. I said Indiana State is a 4.5-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 4 with them. And with regards to total, set mine at a 154.5, here at a 157.5. I think it's one a little bit too lofty, so going to be taking a look at the under, and I'm going to be taking a look at Indiana, willing to lay up to 4, 687, 688 on the betting board. Cincinnati, yes, we are in Cincinnati. They are going to be playing us at Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech finds themselves as underdogs of between 11.5 and 12.5 points. Your total is anywhere between 148 and 149, and with Georgia Tech, I did set them as a underdog of 9 points, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Georgia Tech. That less than savory loss that they took to UMass Lowell, I think is honestly a little bit more savory than a lot of people would think, because UMass Lowell is actually a really good team, and I know that Georgia Tech is going to get dogged for losing on their home floor to a team out there in the American East, but that's a quality team right there, and for Georgia Tech, it does feel like the pieces are starting to come together. Deshaun Claude has been very solid down low. He's been able to log about 13 points, 8.5 boards per contest. Those are very similar numbers to what he put up at a lower level at Western Carolina season ago. Georgia Tech does need to improve their three-point shooting. They're only shooting about 30% from three-point range after a season ago. They shot about 33.5% from the outside, and for Georgia Tech, they were very good at holding on to the ball last season with about 10.5 turnovers per game. They're doing the same thing this season with having Dallin Coleman, Miles Kelly be able to supply a combined 37 points per contest. And then for Cincinnati, they're looking to the son of Edgerrin James, Jizzle James, being able to step up in the backcourt. He's been able to do a solid job with 9.5 points, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, but Cincinnati missing a lot of size right now. They were hoping to have out there on the floor Jamile Reynolds along with Aziz Bendango. Both of these guys are on the floor, and Bendango, he was a 7-footer that was giving Utah Valley right around 3 blocks per contest, so that has been a big impact. Now, Simeus Lucasius, he's proving to be very versatile at 6'8". He has not necessarily been a supreme scorer with about 8.5 points per contest, but gives you about 3 boards, 4.5 assists. He's able to be a nice little point forward for this team, and you've had Dan Skillings Jr. be able to give you 14.5 points per contest, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range after he was more of an ancillary piece a season ago. CJ Frederick, a good knockdown scorer, but really can't do anything off the ball, so it does put this Cincinnati team in a tough situation to try to cover this big of a number. I think that Cincinnati is a better team. I do still think they're going to be able to do a solid job down the line. For Cincinnati, first 4 games of the season, they have won all 4 of their games by double figures, but they have been playing some outmatched competition. I do think that with Georgia Tech getting the contributions that they are from the backcourt and being able to have Claude be able to step up down low to match up with Victor Lakeen, I do think that Georgia Tech can hang within 10. So, did set my number at a 9. Good be taking a look at the points for Georgia Tech, and made my total a 145. Cincinnati playing some very solid defense at Georgia Tech, far from an up-tempo team. So, good to be taking a look at the under, and good to be taking a look at the points with Tech. 689, 690 on the betting board. Cleveland State plays us at East Tennessee State. East Tennessee State is an underdog of between 8.5 and 9 points. Your total is between 142 and 142.5. With Cleveland State, set them as 11.5 point favorites. I am going to be willing to lay this number with Cleveland State. They have been able to do a solid job the last few seasons of being able to generate some turnovers. And for East Tennessee State, you do have to wonder how they're going to be piggybacking off of Prosperity. They were able to get a nice win over Davidson after a relatively rough start to the season, losing to Elon, and not just losing to Butler understandable, but losing by 34 points. Not a good look, to say the least, after they had lost their top scorer from a season ago in Jordan King. They've been able to get quite a bit out of Jaden Seymour down low. He's chipping in there 11 points, 8 boards per contest. Overall for East Tennessee State, they're going to need to rely on their rebounding, as they've got each of their top 5 scorers all giving you at least 4.8 rebounds per game. That includes a part of the Peterson family, Kamari Peterson, no relation, 16 points, 5.5 boards. Is coming from Indiana State, where he was an afterthought and has been able to light it up with all these points. So he still has had a rough time shooting it from 3, as overall for East Tennessee State, they're shooting about 27% from 3. Should be going a little bit further northward, but Cleveland State has done a good job with their perimeter defense. They've done a good job of being able to generate a little bit over 10 steals per contest as well. Tristan Iranura being able to do a little bit of everything, 16.5 points, 6.5 boards, 3 assists, 2 steals, a block and a half per contest, and then Drew Lauder is able to make some noise. He's been able to log about 12.5 points per contest after a season ago. He was able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3 with about 10 points per contest. Love what he's able to bring to the table. And then you've got a versatile player in Jason Woolrich, who at 6'7", he's able to pop some threes last season. Didn't necessarily give you a ton of rebounding. You would like to see him be able to get a little bit more than 2.5 rebounds per game. But all in all, I like the way that these pieces are coming together. It does feel like they've got quite a bit of depth as well. And I do think that ETSU could have a tough time matching up with this backcourt against a Cleveland State team that they've done a good job of being able to hold their opponents down, allowing fewer than 70 points in 3 of their last 4 games. You've got a Cleveland State team coming off of a rough loss against Eastern Michigan, so I do think that this is a good spot for them to be able to bounce back. I did set my total 137.5. I think that ETSU is going to have a tough time putting the ball in the basket, so looking at the under, and want to lay with Cleveland State, 691, 692 on the betting board. Nebraska is going to be playing us to Duquesne. Duquesne is an underdog of 7.5 points here. Total is 148. I set Duquesne as an underdog of 5.5 points. I'm going to be one to take these points. Been quite impressed by what we've been able to get out of the old Duquesne Dukes as far as this season, as you've got Dede Grant, who is a primary scorer for the team, 20 points per contest after a season ago. That was right around 15 or so, but how about these strides that we've seen out of Jimmy Clark Jr. as well? 18 points, 4.2 assists, 3.2 steals per contest. How about a team that is shooting right around about 37% from 3-point range? With Duquesne, they don't have that one primary guy that's going to give you a double-double. They bring in Fusani and Asandrame, pair of guys that were part of that Elite 8 team of St. Peter's a few seasons ago, but I also do think that Andrei Severtsov, coming in from Georgia Southern, where he was a stat sheet stuffer, 14.5 points, 7.5 boards, a steal, shot 36% from 3 at 6'7", is going to be able to elevate the team as well, and I do think that overall athleticism is going to be tough for Nebraska to be able to match up with. Now, Nebraska, they've got their own versatile pieces like Rink Mass, the 6'10" gentleman from Bradley, to be able to log just under 15 points, 11 boards, shooting only about 28% from 3-point range, but just the fact that he's able to shoot threes and be respected from the arc at 6'10", that does cause for a lot of issues for defenses. You've been able to get about 6 rebounds per game out of Josiah Alec, but now you've also got Jawan Gary back in the fold as well. You can tell that when Gary was out there on the floor for Nebraska versus without, this defense was just completely different. Was able to log last season 9.5 points, 6.5 boards, a steal and a half per contest. I really like what he's able to bring as a 6'6", little bit of a do-it-all player that is currently shooting 37.5% from 3-point range. Nebraska very much improved with their defense. You recall a few seasons ago they were playing super duper up-tempo. They have really dialed that back last season. They were outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game. And Duquesne, not necessarily a flyer themselves, and for Duquesne, they have now allowed 72 points or fewer in each of their last 4 games, playing against some relatively solid competition along the way as well. So I do think that this is going to be a bit of a lower scoring slog. I did set my total at a 143.5 Nebraska. They've been tremendous on defense. They have actually not allowed a single opponent to get north of 63. So going to be diving in on the under and going to be able to take the points with the Duke. 693, 694 on the betting board. Southern Miss is going to be playing us to South Dakota State. South Dakota State is an underdog of between 1.5 points and seeing as good as a pick-em price as well. Totals between 145 and 145.5. I made South Dakota State the 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line. Still have Andre Curbelo on the fold for this Southern Miss team, which is actually a little bit of an upgrade for them. But with Southern Miss, you do have to have your question marks as to what you're going to be able to get down low for Southern Miss, because last year Felipe Haas was a nice 6'9" combo player, and he was able to do a nice job of being able to stuff the stat sheet. Victor Iwakuro has been able to do a solid job for UNLV. I totally butchered that last name, by the way, so I do apologize, but he's been able to come in, he's been able to give the team a little bit over a block per contest, but the versatility that you had out of Felipe Haas is now gone, so that means that more is on the plate of Donovan Ivory, who's been able to give you a double-figure amount of points per game, but isn't quite at the level of three-point shooting as a lot of the players for this bunch were a season ago. Austin Crowley has been able to do a very solid job. He's been able to give this team right around 15-plus points per contest as it's popping water bottles all over the place as well, but that said, on the flip side, I do think that for South Dakota State, having out their Zeke Mayo to take over the game, he is going to be the guy that leads this South Dakota State team to victory. He's been able to do a nice job with 20-plus points per contest. He's able to give you 6 boards. He's able to give you 3.5 assists per game. And South Dakota State, last year, they were just unsightly bad from three-point range. That is back in full force, shooting 38% from three-point range. You recall 2 seasons ago, this team was shooting 44.5% from three-point range. So I do think that this team, after they just lost so much from that NCAA tournament team 2 seasons ago, they are back. They are back in full force with Charlie Easley shooting 42.5% from three-point range now. Certainly 70% three-point shooting out of Luke Capel is going to be falling off a little bit, but he's a nice versatile player that is able to give you some good rebounding. And for South Dakota State, we always look at the three-point shooting. We always look at the offense. Each of their top 5 scorers have been able to give you at least 4 rebounds per game. So they're doing a nice job by committee. So I do think that this is going to be a spot where South Dakota State is able to just have that depth, have everyone sort of maul the glass by committee, and that is going to lead them to be able to take down a Southern Miss team that, in general, does have a few moving pieces in the backcourt. They have a little bit of question mark in terms of doling out the ball. So I did set South Dakota State as a 2.5-point favorite. Going to be willing to take them outright on the money line with Southern Miss. They do a relatively solid job of being able to take away the ball. South Dakota State, they do have a few issues with regards to turnovers, but I do think that Southern Miss, they're going to be able to get their steals. That'll turn into transition buckets, but when they don't get those transition buckets, that leads to South Dakota State threes and a little bit of a higher scoring game. So by total 146.5, looking at the over, and South Dakota State as a pick'em / outright on the money line. 695, 696 on the betting board. It is Seattle, and they're going to be playing us Idaho. Idaho, an underdog of between 16 to 16.5 points. Your total on this game is saying between 138.5 and 139. Set this line at 14. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Idaho. For the Seattle team, it's just a little bit of a team of mystery that is playing very slowly right now. They are outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, so being able to win by margin is going to be a little bit difficult for this bunch. Now with Seattle, they do have a takeover score in Cam Tyson. He's only been able to log about 15.5 points per contest. Season ago, that was more around 20 points per game. I do think that he's going to be able to kick it into high gear, and with Isaac Jones out of the fold for a season ago for Idaho, that has led to Taryn Frank needing to step up, and Frank looked like he was on his way to having a nice year last year before injuries cut his season short at 6 games, but he began his career at Vanderbilt and TCU to be able to give the team about 12 points, 5 boards. Now, I do think that this team is a little bit outgunned, as in their lone step-up game against Washington State, they did lose that game 84-59, but that was their first game of the season, dealing with a lot of moving parts, and I do think that this team has found their rhythm just a little bit more. Julius Mim has been able to do a solid job down low, being able to log about 7 boards per contest. With Idaho, they're shooting about 32% from three-point range. You'd like to see that go northward a little bit, but they've been able to get some outside shooting out of Titus Urot. He has come in as a true freshman, has been able to log about 7.5 points per contest. That's been a nice upside piece for the team. And then you've got Keeson Rose. He comes in as a non-Division I transfer. Has been able to make a little bit of an impact with 9 points per contest. Has a little bit of versatility. And then with Seattle, outside of Cam Tyson, just a lot of guys with size that have a bit of versatility. And they all just really help out Cam Tyson, for lack of a better term. Like Kobe Williamson at 6'8", he gives you about a block per contest. Chips in there 4.5 boards. Brandon Charfield is able to pop threes at about 6'10", and last season did shoot north of 35% from three-point range, but he'll give you about like 7 to 8 points per contest. They are missing Paris Dawson, who's been in and out of the fold to help out in the backcourt. That's been a little bit of an issue, and I do think that for Seattle, they should be able to win this game and do so rather handily. Idaho has been one of the least efficient defenses in all of college basketball, which is why I did set my total at 142, but I do think that with Idaho, they're going to find a way to be able to get the ball in the basket with Frankie company, so going to be taking a look at the points with Idaho, set them as a 14-point dog, and the over turnovers, 697, 698 on the betting board. Fort Wayne is going to be playing on the road against San Francisco. The Dons are a 13-point favorite. Your totals between 147 and 148.5, and with San Francisco, set them as favorites of 11 points. So I'm going to be taking a look at those points with San Francisco. It's a team that I really do think has quite a bit of upside. Jonathan Mogbo coming in from Missouri State is going to be able to give the team quite a bit more defense he's used to, a little bit more of a slow and controlled style, but has really turned into a nice player for this team, averaging about 15.7 boards per contest. And Old Mongolian Mike coming in from Dayton, one of the more underrated and more versatile players in college basketball. 11 points, 3 boards, 4.8 assists, all while being able to pop threes at a career about 31% clip. I love what he's able to bring to the table. And then when it comes to this Fort Wayne team, they have been able to do a nice job with their outside shooting about 39% from three. I think there should be a little bit of a fall off, but that always has been the forte of Fort Wayne. You go back to what Fort Wayne did a season ago. They were a solid 3-point shooting team, though 2 years ago they were much better, but they did have those 13 turnovers per contest, so I do think that we're going to see a rise in their 9 turnovers per game, but they bring in one of the better D2 players in all of college basketball from a season ago, and Rasheed Bello, and he has been a takeover guy. How about 18 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 2.5 steals, really went under the radar and has been consistent with 13-plus points each out of the last 5 games, coming in from old UW Parkside, the lone D2 school in all of Wisconsin. Quentin Morton Robinson has been able to do a nice job being able to give you about 15.5 points per contest. He's currently shooting 50% from 3. Once again, should see a little bit of a fall off, and where Fort Wayne does go wrong, they don't have a ton down low. You've got Eric Mulder, who's at 6'8", has been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game, so he's been able to help out a little bit there, but for Fort Wayne, they are going to have a tough time with all the size of San Francisco, even though he doesn't score a lot. Vladimir Molkovsky is right around 7'2". He should be able to do a good job. I'll be able to knife in, get some rebounds. Noah Dio Newberry is someone that right around 6'7" has been able to pop some threes, giving you about 4.5 rebounds per game. Another guy that's going to be a little bit difficult for IPFW to be able to match up with, but San Francisco does get pretty careless with the ball, so this is a rare case where I do think that Fort Wayne wins the turnover battle, and that keeps them lively in this game. Set my line at 11, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Fort Wayne, and did set my total at 148.5. Fort Wayne has been putting up some absolutely tremendous offensive numbers, but that has been against much lesser competition. San Francisco has been playing a little bit more low and slow, and I do think that San Francisco going to be able to get this game slowed down. So diving in on the under, and you're going to be taking a look at the points with Fort Wayne. 699, 700 on the betting board. Montana State is going to be playing against UC Riverside. UC Riverside, the road team, is a 4-point underdog, and the total on this game, finding it at a 128.5. I did set my total at 135.5. I'm going to be looking at the under. Montana State with Danny Sprinkle now moved on to Utah State. They've adapted an even slower system than they had a season ago, but I still do think that they've got enough production to be able to push this total over. Plus, with it being this tight of a differential, personally, I set my line at a 7.5. If a team is down 4 with a minute left, they're going to probably foul. If a team is down 7 with a minute left to go, they're definitely going to foul. So I think that has a little bit of a hand to play in this as well. And Riverside's defense, just honestly, has not been too terrific. They've given up 76-plus points in each of their first 3 games of the season, going into the UW Green Bay game from last night. Even against the non-Division I school that they played in, UC Merced, they gave up 69 points there. You have been able to have Brandon Grischetti come in from Incarnate Word. He's been able to give you 10 points and shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range with a little bit of versatility. You got Jalen Martinez, who's able to give you about 5 boards per contest, along with a pretty trustworthy guy down low. And Will Tattersall, he has been with the program for quite a bit. He was a starter last season that really didn't see a lot of run in general. He was out there for like the opening tip, what have you, was more of a defensive stopper. So he should be able to elevate the team a little bit. And for Riverside, they don't have a lot of 3-point shooting, which is probably a big reason why this total is set so low. But with Montana State, you've got nice versatility out of Robert Ford III. Built Ford tough over at Idaho State a few seasons ago in his 2 years, was averaging right around about 6 rebounds, 12 points, 3 assists per game. He's got all sorts of versatility, and you finally have Eddie Turner III fully healthy. He began his career at Columbia, just was marred by injuries the last few seasons. In general, was only able to play 18 games for the 2019-20 season up until this season, but when he's been out there, he's been able to total 2.5 assists per contest. He's able to bury some threes. Love what he's able to bring to the table. And then you've also got the UT Arlington transfer, Brandon Walker, who should be able to improve on the fact that he's only been able to get right around 2.5 rebounds per contest. But Arvett Arlington a season ago was a nice little defensive stopper, able to chip in there right around 7 points per contest. Love what all these guys are able to bring to the table. Both of these teams play relatively slowly, but Montana State, they make the most out of their possessions. Fewer than 9 turnovers per game, and with the way that UC Riverside has just not been able to do a solid job on the glass, the way that they have not had much in their backcourt as well, and they've been a tough defensive team as well. I do think that this is a total that I set a little bit too low. Set my total 135.5, looking at the over, and one to lay with Montana State, set them as a 7.5 point favorite. 7-1, 7-2 on the betting board. This is a game that's off the board between New Mexico and Rice from the Dollar Loan Center in Henderson. No numbers up on this game, but I said New Mexico is a 4-point favorite, and I did set my total at 157, so 156.5 or less. Going to be taking a look at the over, 157.5 or higher. Going to be taking a look at the under. We've got a pair of teams that are currently in quite a bit of transition, as with Rice, you give her Ode to Lane Kiffin, go Owls, but man, this team is really looking to Max Fiedler, and they don't have a whole heck of a lot else. With Max Fiedler, he's been able to do a nice job, doling out 5 assists as a 6'11" big man, and been able to chip in there 10 points, 8 rebounds per contest. And you do have Travis Evie returning from a season ago. Just doesn't feel like he's as effective as he has been in past years. You've got Jalen House on the flip side, a big giant question mark for this team. You had no idea if he was going to be able to play yesterday or not. He's dealing with a little bit of a hip issue, and once again, much like my handicap was yesterday, even if Jalen House does go in this game, you got to expect him to be much less than 100%. So that is a little bit of a part of this as well. And with UNLV, you can tell just how big of a difference maker he does make when he is on the court rather than off the court, because in the first half without him yesterday, they were unable to break the 25-point plateau. So that was a little bit less than terrific. UNLV does have quite a bit of size, though. Isaiah Cottrell is someone that at 6'10", should be able to do a good job against Fiedler, as he's got a little bit of versatility. Jalen Hill was a starter over at Oklahoma a season ago, where he was able to log right around 9.5 points, 5.5 boards per contest. Luis Rodriguez is a nice statue suffer, but UNLV having a brutal time just being able to put the ball in the basket in general. Meanwhile, for Rice, this team as well, they are very much hit or miss with regards to their three-point shooting, and we just see Rice year in and year out be one of the lesser defensive teams in all of college basketball. That's about as politely as I could put it, as they were right around 300th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So whenever a team is going through a funk, typically you can look to them to be able to help you out with regards to your offense. So this is a spot where I did set a very high total of a 157. You've got two of the faster teams in all of college basketball, a pair of teams that have been spotty with their defense, to say the least. And with New Mexico, thinking that Jalen House is probably going to be out of the fold, and again, if he does play, going to be much less than 100%, did set New Mexico as a 4-point favorite, so one to lay up to 3.5 here, 4.5 for more, taking the points with Rice, and 156.5 or less, looking at the over 157.5 or higher to the under. 7-3, 7-4 on the betting board. Toledo and UC Irvine, new battle from the Dollar Loan Center. UC Irvine, a 3-point favorite, and your total on this game is 150.5. Did set my total at 149.5. Toledo is a rocket ship in terms of their offense, but you've got a UC Irvine team that, even though they've cranked up their tempo a little bit in recent years, this is still a UC Irvine bunch. They are one of the tougher teams to be able to score on in all of college basketball. You've got tons and tons of size with this team, and Bent Lutken, the 7'1" gentleman that's able to pop threes, comes over from Germany and has been able to offer great versatility. Devin Tills, who began his career over at UNLV, he is a career north of 36% three-point shooter at 6'6", that going into yesterday was logging 11 points, 7.5 boards, 2.5 assists per contest, and I think it's a big difference maker for UC Irvine, having that trigger man of Pierre Cockrell. Pierre Cockrell is a very much pass-first guy. Even though he's capable of shooting threes, I remember at Pacific a few seasons ago, he shot north of like 36% from three-point range. So it does befuddle me a little bit that he doesn't take the green light a little bit more, but he does a great job doling out north of 5 assists per contest, gives the ball away with fewer than 2.5 turnovers per contest, so that's very good. And on the flip side for Toledo, it is a little bit of a new-look team. They lose 4 out of their top 6 scorers from a season ago, but Tyler Cochran, who had a season cut short a season ago due to injury, he is back. The Northern Illinois transfer is able to shoot it well from three-point range. I remember over at Northern Illinois, a few seasons ago, he was averaging in the neighborhood like 17 points, 7 boards. He was putting up video game-like numbers. And then Dante Maddox has been very good at the point guard spot as well. Entering into last night, 3.7 assists for every turnover that he committed. Last year shot 45% from three-point range. Entering into yesterday, was picking up right where he left off, shooting about 40% from the outside. And then you do have Raheem Moss, who's able to give you about 15.5 points per game as well. But Toledo, they always have a little bit of a tough time with their defense. They don't have the size to be able to match up with the likes of Bent Lutken, Devin Tills, and all that versatility. So with UC Irvine, one to lay up to 3 with them. I did set them as a 3.5 point favorite, and in terms of total, made mine a 149.5. So you're at 150.5, diving in on the under, and one to lay up to 3 with UC Irvine. 7-5, 7-6 on the betting board. This is for the Gulf Coast Showcase, as Iona and Buffalo do battle from Hertz Arena No numbers currently up on this game, but I did set Iona as a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 7 with them. This Buffalo team is just very much a work in progress right now. With Buffalo, you bring in the freshman in Anquan Bolden Jr. Yes, the son of that Anquan Bolden, who's been able to do a relatively solid job. He's been able to give the team right around 8 points per contest. You can tell that he's going to be a stud player for this team moving forward, but this team is completely built around their versatile big men. You've got Cy Chapman, who's been able to give you 15 plus points, 6 plus boards. Navia Smith, he had a little bit of fall off with regards to scoring against Louisiana, with just 2 points yesterday, but has been able to give you north of 10 rebounds per contest. He's able to give you a block. He's been able to do a nice job of being able to put the ball in the basket, Saints yesterday as well, but you really don't have a lot on the outside for this Buffalo team, and they entered into yesterday where they got lambasted by Louisiana, committing 18.8 turnovers per game. Even though Iona's a little bit out of sorts in the backcourt, that's because they've got so many moving pieces. They still have taken care of the ball. They still have fewer than 10 turnovers per contest. Wiesa Ponso, the 6'7" versatile player who comes in from Stetson, has been able to give the team north of 10 points per contest. Last year shot 46.5% from 3. We should see a little bit of a fall off there, but Joe Brown, who is a starter over at Cal, where he was giving out right around about 2.5 to 3 assists per contest, was a pretty solid scorer. He's been able to do a nice job of being able to run the offense as well. Not necessarily taking games over with regards to his scoring, but he's been able to give out 3 assists. Has really done a good job on the defensive side of things as well, north of 2.5 steals per contest. As your main scorer has actually been Eden Tertout, who over at Harvard last season was a solid player. He averaged 9.5 points, shot right around about 37% from 3-point range. Has really become that guy, though, with north of 17 points per contest. You do have quite a bit of depth with the team, even with Osborne Chema currently on the fold. So with Iona, 1 to lay up to 7 with them. 8 or more going to be taking the look at the points with Buffalo. And with Buffalo, I just don't know if they do their part with a north of 150 total. So semi-total to where a 147 or less, going to be taking a look at the over 148 or higher to the under. And keep in mind, 8 o'clock a.m. Pacific, 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time tip. So get your bets in early. 707, 708 on the betting board. Louisiana is going to be playing against Long Beach State. Also out there, Edwards Arena. No numbers up on this game, but I've got my handicap. 1 to lay up to 1.5 with Long Beach State. 2.5 or more taking the points with Louisiana. And make my total at 156, 155.5 or less. Looking at the over, 156.5 or higher. Going to be taking a look at the under, as you've got 2 very fast teams that are going at it in this one. And with Long Beach State, I do think that they just have a little bit more down low, which is the reason why I did set them as a slight favorite. So you've got the Traores, and Abakar Traore, he's more around 6'5", 6'6". Season ago was able to give you about 8 boards, a little bit over 10 points per contest, but gives you a little bit of passing, gives you a little bit of outside shooting. And then Lucina Traore, he's more of a low post presence that is very much going to be having his back to the basket, was able to average a double-double a season ago, and I think that that's going to be a tough matchup for Louisiana. Now, what Louisiana has in their corner is the best facilitator in this game, Famous Folks. Folks has been able to give out north of 6 assists per contest, and he's now got a lot more out of Kobe Julien, who has spent his entire college basketball career being a little bit banged up and just was out of sorts in general last season. 2 years ago, during the 2021-22 campaign, averaged 12.5 points per contest. That was right around 4 points per game a season ago. He was sort of in Jordan Brown's shadow. This year, he is back up to north of 18 points per contest. I believe that he was a former top 200 or so recruit, has really been able to live up to that billing at 6'6", shooting about 35% from 3-point range. Love what he brings to the table. And then on the flip side, Marcus Siones, he in the backcourt for Long Beach State, is a very hit or miss guy. He's now had 10 points or fewer in each of the last 2 games after having 35 in that win against Michigan. He's been a career mid to high 30s 3-point shooter, but you just don't know whether you're going to get 35 or you're going to get a turd. So that's always something that you do need to gauge, but I do think a little bit more of a consistent player for this team is Jaden Jones. He was able to have 19 points in that win over Iona, and for Jones, a career about mid-30s 3-point shooter that is someone that I feel like is able to give you a little bit more of steadiness. He's able to give you darn near a block per contest because he's got pretty good size at 6'5", 6'6", and then I do think that you're going to see a little bit more moving forward out of Messiah Thompson. Began his career at Campbell. Last year was a primary scorer over at Alabama A&M. Career about 37% 3-point shooter to help out a Long Beach State team that they did relatively everything well a season ago. Say and shoot the 3. They were a bottom 30 team in terms of overall 3-point shooting percentage. So I think that bringing in Messiah Thomas is going to be able to help out with that a little bit. And for Louisiana, they do have a little bit of shortage of pieces from a season ago. This is still a team that is going to be able to do an okay job on the glass. I do think that Joe Charles, who has been able to give you about 6 boards per contest, going to be able to do a relatively okay job. But I just feel like Long Beach State has a bit more in the backcourt, and that'll allow them to be able to get the job done in this one. So did set Long Beach State as a 2-point favorite. Want to lay up to 1.5 with them, 2.5 or more, taking the points with Louisiana, 155.5 or less, looking at the over, 156.5 or higher to the under. 709, 710 on the betting board. It is Illinois State taking on Wright State. Wright State hopes to be the right side as they're currently off the board because these games just went final as I'm recording this. But that said, I do have Wright State as perhaps being the right side. I made them a 4-point favorite, willing to lay up to 3.5 with them, 4.5 or more, taking the points with Illinois State, and did set my total at a flat 150. Anything above 150, going to be taking a look at the under. Anything below 150, going to be taking a look at the over with Wright State. You've got such a good duo with Tanner Holden along with Trey Calvin being able to combine for in the neighborhood of about 35 plus points per contest. These two guys just do such a good job of being able to complement one another. The big thing with Wright State is they're well outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So they lose by 9 yesterday against Hofstra, despite the fact that they go 9 of 18 from 3-point range. And I mean, with Holden and Calvin, they're getting a little bit more out of the ancillary pieces. AJ Braun has been able to give you about 11.5 points. He's able to chip in there about 6.5 rebounds per game. You've been able to have Alex Hibergreste, hopefully I said that correctly. I'm sure that I did not. He's been able to give you about 8 points per contest as well, and they go up against an Illinois State team that really doesn't have a lot of outside shooting. They've gotten some good production out of Dalton Banks, comes in from Southern Illinois. He's been able to do a solid job with about 4 assists, 4 boards, 13 plus points per contest, but I mean, overall, Illinois State shooting about 57.5%, the free throw line 32.5% from 3 going into yesterday. It feels like they've got a lot of pieces that they're able to utilize. They've got a lot of options. They're just not really good options. Miles Foster has been able to give you about 8 boards. He's chipping in there nearly 10 points per contest, but not a guy that's able to light it up from the outside. Kendall Lewis had an amazing start to last season before he fell off, and he has been just so incredibly inconsistent over the last 12 months in general as well. And for this Illinois State team, they do very much have a tough time being able to guard the perimeter as well, and they've been just very sloppy themselves with about 15 turnovers per contest. Illinois State certainly playing at a little bit of a slower tempo, and for Illinois State, they've done a pretty solid job with their defense as well, as they have allowed now 74 points or fewer in 4 out of their last 5 games. So it is a spot where at a 150 or higher, I'm going to be taking a look at the under. 149.5 or less, going to be taking a look at the over. And with regards to Wright State, willing to lay up to 3.5 with them, 4.5 or more, taking a look at Illinois State. Now we head to 7-11, 7-12 on the betting board. This is all out there in the great state of Florida. Hofstra and High Point do battle. With Hofstra, I set them as an 11-point favorite. This is another game that's off the board with a total of 151. Hofstra has really done a solid job with their defense. We always talk up their offense, and they did have a little bit of a rough go of it against Wright State yesterday, but with this Hofstra team, you've got a backcourt that I really do like. Donaldson Dunbar along Tyler Thomas. They're combining to give you nearly 40 points per contest. Hofstra is a very good 3-point shooting team that does need to work on the turnovers. 13 turnovers per contest, not necessarily great, and there needs to be a little bit of help for Raquan Carlos, who he's been able to do a solid job in the backcourt, doling out right around 5.5 assists per contest. Very much a pass first guy, but I do think that they're going to be able to get a little bit more moving forward out of both Silas Sunday along the Jaco Fritz. Both of these guys have ideal north of 6'10" size. With Fritz, he's able to pop threes, and I don't know if he just wasn't right at the beginning of the season or what, but and he had a combined 13 points in the first 4 games of the season, went for 14 and 9 yesterday. That's more of the Jaco Fritz that we all know and love. And then on the other side, you got a High Point team that, I mean, they've been able to do a nice job of being able to get this spot, give credit where credit is due, but I do have my question marks with what they're going to be able to do moving forward, because they do bring in quite a few transfers that they've been able to do a nice job of being able to mix and match with, and they've got one holdover from last season, and Abdoulaye Thiam, who was able to log about 15 points per contest. He has been one of the main scorers from a season ago, pairing in tandem with what you've been able to get out of Duke Miles. He comes in from Troy. He's been able to give you 17 points per contest, dealt with injuries throughout his career. Now he's fully healthy, but for High Point, they're shooting an unrealistic north of 39% from 3-point range, and they have down low someone that I like in Kamani Hamilton, who's been able to do a nice job with right around 8 rebounds per contest, comes in from Mississippi State, but it does feel like depth is going to be very much an issue for High Point moving forward, and with this being pretty much game number 3 in 3 days, I think they might tire out against a Hofstra team that is very much guard-oriented. So one to lay up to 10.5 with Hofstra, 11.5 or more, taking the points with High Point, and then 150.5 or less, looking at the over 151 or higher, going to be taking a look at the under. 7-13, 7-14 on the betting board. It is North Carolina, and they're going to be playing against Northern Iowa. This is a event happening out there in the battle for Atlantis, with North Carolina, an 11.5 to a 12.5 point favorite, and your total setting between 147.5 and 148.5. And with Northern Iowa, I did set them as an underdog of 9.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take those points. Now with Northern Iowa, they are going to have a tough time matching up with Armando Bacot. Bacot just able to give you north of 13 rebounds per contest. He had a little bit of a down year last year. He is not having a down year this year. He has been highly effective with that regard, but I do take a look at the overall versatility of Northern Iowa, and I do think that that's going to be a nice elixir. Nate Icu was limited to just 2 games a season ago. He was very versatile 2 years ago, and thus far this season, 14 points, 6.5 boards, 3.5 assists. Love what he's able to bring to the table. You're able to couple that with what you're able to get out of Bowen Born as more of a primary scorer of this team. For Bowen Born, he's only been able to give you 8 points per contest in the first 2 games. He's been dealing with a little bit of injury, should be good to go in this one, but was able to be a 15-plus point per game scorer a season ago. Michael Duex, he a season ago had 10 points. He was able to give you about 4.5 boards, a little bit over a steal per contest as well. And then Titan Anderson, him being able to chip in there north of 6 rebounds per contest a season ago, should be able to do a relatively solid job this year. I think it's going to be able to hold at bay a North Carolina team that is clearly in a little bit of transition with their backcourt as well. They're looking to play up tempo with guys like Cormac Ryan. You're able to throw in there Paxton Wojcik, Harrison Ingram, guys that came from a little bit of slower systems. RJ Davis has been highly effective, giving you 14 points, 2.5 assists with North Carolina. Not really turning the ball over all a lot, but their shooters in Cormac Ryan and company, they just seem to be a little bit out of sorts right now. They're shooting about 31% from 3-point range. Depth has become a little bit of an issue as well. James Okonkwo has not seen a lot of minutes along with Jalen Withers, and when Withers has been out there, he hasn't necessarily been able to give you a whole lot of fly. Love the upside of Harrison Ingram, 12.6 boards, probably the best athlete out there on the floor, sans Armando Bacot, but at the same time, I do think that with Northern Iowa, they're going to be crafty in their defenses, and with the battle for Atlantis, I always note this, the rims are just super duper tight, and you can't get anything to go unless you really swish it through, so I do have my totals in this entire event a little bit lower. I set mine at a 145.5. Northern Iowa has been cranking up their tempo in recent years, but I don't think that it's going to be cranked up enough to be able to get an over in this one. I do think that North Carolina going to need to play a little bit more slowly this year, so going to be willing to take 10 plus with Northern Iowa and going to be taking a look at the under 715, 716 on the betting board. Texas and Villanova do battle in the battle for Atlantis. With Villanova, they are a favorite of anywhere between 2.5 to 3 points, and your totals between 129.5 and 130, and this is a circumstance where I am going to be willing to take a look at Texas Tech getting 3 or more. I set my line at 2.5. With Villanova, they do appear to be a little bit out of sorts right now with regards to their backcourt. They bring in a lot of moving parts, and it's a lot of talented parts. You've got to love what TJ Bamba is able to bring to the table. Was a solid 3-point shooter over at Washington State a season ago, and I do think that moving forward, you are going to be able to have Justin Moore just continue to improve this defense, which has been much better for Villanova this year than it was a season ago. But with this Texas Tech team, the Grant McCaslin style appears to be working. They've done a good job of being able to slow games down to a crawl. You've really had Pops Isaacs be that feature guy, being able to give you 12 points, 3.5 assists, 4.5 boards. He's just out there making plays, shot about 38% from 3-point range a season ago. That's been down a little bit this year for a Tech team that is currently only shooting 20.5% from 3-point range. I don't know if this is an event that it really rises up too much, but that is going to be going northward. Texas Tech needs to clean up the 15 turnovers per contest. That was a issue for them last season as well, but they should be able to hold up down low with having Darion Williams, Warren Washington being a true 7-footer, being able to combine for north of 17 rebounds per game, and for that matter, got a Texas Tech team that out of your top 7 scores, 6 of them giving you at least 3.7 rebounds per game. I think that Villanova is going to have a little bit of a tough time on the glass, despite the fact that Tyrell Burton, who has come in from Richmond, has been able to do a solid job with Tyler Burton, right around 12 points, 8 boards, shooting 40% for 3-point range. And Villanova, the one thing I will say for them, if they have a lead late, they can be able to cover this game at the free throw line. They are one of the top free throw shooting teams in all of college basketball. Again, after they led all of college basketball each of the last 2 years in this category. Eric Dixon, though, only about 8.5 points per contest after he a season ago was one of their primary scorers. That is a little bit concerning. I do think that Texas Tech going to do a good job with their defense-oriented style. Villanova is a little bit of a slow and controlled team as well, but I do think that we are going to see a rise in the Texas Tech 3-point shooting, and Villanova a very efficient, even though slow, offense as well. So I'm going to be taking a look at Villanova if they get down to -2, but here at 3 or more, going to be taking a shot on Texas Tech, and did set my total 134.5, going to be taking a look at the over. Now let's hit my DK DK Network right at pick, and hopefully get online with these. I apologize about the last few. 7-18 on the betting board. Memphis is going to be playing against Michigan. Michigan finds themselves as an underdog of a point, and your total on this game starting between 157.5 and 158.5, and my write-up that is going to be on Michigan. I set them as a 5-point favorite. Memphis has looked very impressive thus far, being able to put up 90 plus points in 2 out of their first 3 games of the season, but I do think that there is going to be quite a bit of a fall-off moving forward, because I do think that with just all these new pieces, Memphis brings back just 2 guys that put in there a single point a season ago. I think that that's going to be a big giant issue for them, and I do think that that's going to cause the turnovers to manifest. You've got a Memphis team that has been averaging right around 15 turnovers per contest. They're shooting an unrealistic 40% from 3-point range, with Javon Quinterly, David Jones, and Jaquan Walton all shooting north of 46% from 3-point range, and Quinterly has a track record of being able to hit threes. Jaquan Walton last season, he shot 40% from the outside over at Wichita State with 14 points per contest, and David Jones has always had versatility. He shot the last 2 years about 29.5% from 3-point range. I do think that we're going to see a little bit of coolage there. I like what you're able to get down low for this team as well. Malcolm Dandridge is able to give you a few rebounds, and then you do bring in Jordan Brown. He was over at Louisiana with 10.5 points, 5.5 boards. He has been in college basketball for a very long time, by the way, but with this Michigan team, you've got to love the way that Teach Me How to Dougie McDaniel has been able to really elevate this offense. 21 points per contest for a Michigan team, currently in the top 30 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and the overall versatility that you're getting out of this team is just absolutely incredible as well. Will Cheddar is right now shooting north of 70% from 3. Again, we're going to see a fall off there. Terrence Williams, he's shooting north of 40% from the outside as well, but these guys, they've got size. They're able to give you some boards, especially in the case of William Cheddar. He needs to work on that a little bit more, but Amari Burnett as well. I mean, it really stood out to me that he was able to put in there something like 15 points in the first 6 minutes of that game against St. John's. This is a Michigan team coming off of a rough loss against Long Beach State, but I actually think that Long Beach State is a relatively solid program, and I do think that Michigan is going to be able to avenge that loss. I do think that they're going to be able to do a nice job of holding down a Memphis team that just been white out from 3, and in general, I do think that we are going to see both of these offenses take a little bit of a dive after they have been just so hot from 3-point range, but I do think that with Michigan having a little bit more camaraderie, bringing in Olivier Kamla, they're going to get the job done against a Memphis team that is very much makeshift. So my DK Network right to pick, that is going to be on Michigan. Either getting a point or outright on the money line, depends upon if money lines are posted up in the AM or not. And with regards to this total, taking it under, set my total at 151. 719, 720 on the betting board. It is Arkansas, and they are going to be playing against Stanford. This is also in the lovely Bahamas, and Stanford finds themselves as an underdog. You're going to be getting them anywhere between 5.5 and 7-point underdogs, and your total on this game is anywhere between 156.5 and 157.5. And with Stanford, I'm willing to take 7 or more with them. Now, I'm seeing a 5.5 out there, and trust me, for those that know my disdain for Jared Haas and the Stanford program, not necessarily Stanford itself, but just the fact that they've held on to him as a coach for so long, I would rather lay 5.5 than take 7, but looks like at the time of this podcast, uploading, all the 5.5s are probably going to be gone, so at that number, I would be willing to take the points with Stanford. And with the Stanford team, they do bring in Andrei Stojakovic. He's been able to do a nice job of being able to elevate this offense, as in general, you do have a Stanford team that is playing quite a bit more up-tempo. They are willing to bomb it from 3-point range, which is very much a departure from what we've seen in past years from Stanford. This is typically a relatively controlled team that last season was outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game. You got Maximine Radon, who's been able to fire on all cylinders with about 19 points per contest, and typically I'm against Stanford in this one, but you've got an Arkansas team that does have a lot of moving parts in general. They've been able to click on all cylinders thus far this season, but if you take a look at some of the competition that they played, it's less than terrific, and when they played a real team in UNC Greensboro, they lost that game outright as well. So hard to be in on this team as of right now. Maybe I will be in March. Devo Davis, he's able to do a solid job with about 5 boards, 3 assists, just a little bit of a do-it-all player, and you've gotten some good 3-point shooting. Like Trevon Brazil is someone who at 6'10" is able to give you 6.5 boards, 10.5 points, shooting 45% from 3. K-Leaf Battle's been shooting 47.5% from the outside with 16.5 points per contest. Tremont Mark has been able to do a solid job on that front as well. And Arkansas not really turning the ball over a ton, but this Arkansas team has been a little bit rough with their defense. When you're giving up like 77 points to Old Dominion, that's rough. And for Stanford, they gave up 89 points to Santa Clara themselves. So that is a little bit of a bad situation as well, but I do think that with the very unfriendly rims here, that is going to be hurting both of these teams. And with Sanford at a 7 or more, I'm going to be willing to take the points because you also have Jared Bynum, who's been very efficient with this team. 8.3 assists for every turnover that he's had, and they've got a little bit of versatility as well, with the likes of a Brandon Angel being able to pop some threes, giving the team 18 points per contest. It's out with a little bit of injury, but should be good to go in this tournament. And then you've also got Spencer Jones, who has been able to do a solid job throughout his career, being able to pop some threes. Was out for the last game, so you do want to be checking in on his status, but at a 7 or more, going to be willing to take the points with Sanford, and did set my total at a 152.5, so also diving in on the under. 721, 722 on the betting board. This is from Kansas City, Missouri. You've got Colorado State and Boston College doing battle. Boston College finds themselves anywhere between 5 and 6 point underdogs, and your total on this game is anywhere between 148 and 149, and with Colorado State, I did set them as a favorite of 5 points, so now being able to get 6, I'm going to be taking a look at those points with Boston College. Boston College is going to have the most versatile player out there on the floor. That'd be Quentin Post. He's a true 7-footer that has been able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range over the last 2 seasons, averaging 14-plus points, 7-plus rebounds per game. Now, the question is, what are you going to be able to get out of this Boston College backcourt? Because the Boston College backcourt has not been terrific, and they have to go up against Isaiah Stevens. Isaiah Stevens is able to give you an assist-to-turnover ratio north of 3. He's able to pop it from 3. He's able to give you 15-plus points per contest, but this is not a Colorado State team that's going to get physical with you. You've got Patrick Cartier. He's a 6'8" nice combo player that's able to pop it from 3-point range. Does a very solid job being able to give you a double-figure amount of points per game, but he really doesn't give you any sort of rebounding whatsoever. Niquay Clifford, he does come in from Colorado. That should be able to help elevate this team a little bit in terms of their interior play in general, but you do have your question marks there for this Boston College team. They are a little bit more of a rough and tumble team. They're looking to slow things down, and Colorado State does not play at any sort of blistering pace. Just a case where Colorado State is a team that does a good job of being able to put the ball in the basket, and last season they were outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis as well. So you're going to be looking to Claudell Harris, Jaden Zachary to be able to expose some of those guards that do play a little bit of lax coverage. And for Boston College, they have been able to take care of the ball. 10.5 turnovers per game. They shoot about 33% from distance. So Zachary, remember 2 years ago, shot darn near 48% from 3-point range. I do think that this total is set a little bit too high because I do think that Boston College going to be looking to slow things down. I do think that Colorado State going to be a little bit improved on defense as well. We've seen that the last 2 games against outmatched competition. So did set my total more around a 141, diving in on the under. And with Colorado State, can only set them as a 5-point favorite. So we'll take 6 with Boston College. 723, 724 on the betting board. Loyola Chicago is going to be playing against Creighton, also at the T-Mobile Center. Creighton, a pretty big size favorite. You're going to be getting them anywhere between 16 to 16.5 point favorites, and your totals between 144.5 and 145.5. And with this Creighton bunch, I did set them as a 14-point favorite. I am going to be willing to take the big number that we're getting with Loyola Chicago. Loyola Chicago, once again, having a big-time issue with regards to turnovers, but Creighton is not known as a team that is really going to be just enforcing the issue, is really going to be getting up in your grill and forcing a bunch of turnovers. So I actually don't think that this is a terrible matchup for Loyola Chicago. Now, with Loyola Chicago, they're going to have a tough time just matching up with the overall versatility and the athleticism that you do have of Creighton. Trey Alexander has been able to give this team 21 points per contest, and as a Creighton bunch as a whole is currently shooting 40% from 3-point range. And what I really love about this Creighton team is that now you've got depth. Like Steve Ashworth was looked at as being a guy that was really going to be able to elevate this offense. Currently, he's like the number 5 scorer, giving out about 3.5 assists per contest. You've had Ryan Kalkbrenner do a solid job down low. He's right now not even leading the team in rebounding. That's actually Frederick King, who's been able to give you 6.5 boards. This team is about 9 or so deep, which I really thought was a big key for Creighton moving forward, but I do like what I've seen out of Desmond Watson over at Loyola Chicago. Last year, when he was over at Davidson, wasn't necessarily giving you a whole heck of a lot, shooting about 47.5% for 3 thus far this season. Then Philip Olsen was really the main guy from a season ago, was able to give the team 12 points per contest. He was out of the fold, though, in that game against New Orleans, and you saw Loyola Chicago without him really struggle as they they won that game 73-70. They very nearly lost that game. Braden Norris, he has been just not giving you a lot on the offensive side of things, and Greg Dolan, he is a guy that has had success in the past when he was over at Cornell a season ago, shot 42.5% from 3, 13.5 points per contest. I do think that if you are going to be having Olsen out of the fold, which sounds like it was a little bit more precautionary, but you do want to be checking in on that front. that is going to lead to him having the ball in his hands a little bit more. But Dame Edelkoen, I do think he's got versatility. He's going to be able to hold his own down low. I do think that Kalkbrenner or Frederick King, they're going to be able to win that matchup. But I do think that this number has gotten a little bit out of whack. I do think that Loyola Chicago, with not having the threat of a lot of turnovers, going to be able to put the ball in the basket. And Creighton has been white hot with regards to their shooting. So this is a spot where at 16 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Loyola Chicago. And with regards to the total, set mine at more around a 146. So at a 144.5 to a 145.5, going to be taking a look at the over to be going along with the points as well. And now we hit the Stan Sheriff Center for the Maui Invitational. These are games that are all off the board, and some of these are TBD as well. I'm going to need to project for because of how late these games went down, but that said, 725, 726, this is going to be the third and fourth place game between the loser of Purdue versus Tennessee and the loser of Kansas versus Marquette. I am thinking that we are going to get Marquette in this one, and I'm also thinking that in this one we're most likely going to be seeing Tennessee, and in a Marquette versus Tennessee game, I'd be leaning towards Tennessee being about a 4, maybe 4.5 point favorite. Again, this is one where I really do have to just sort of take a blind stab, so I apologize if I'm a little bit off on these, and I apologize if I'm previewing teams a little bit too much that don't end up actually playing in these games. It's very, very difficult to do with not knowing the bracket and everything like that, but that said, I do think that we are going to be seeing that matchup, and in that matchup, I would be setting Tennessee as a little bit more of a 4-point favorite. You do have a Tennessee team that was number 1 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis a season ago. You saw them play very tough against Purdue yesterday as well, and Dalton Knecht, he is able to connect from 3-point range, but you just always fear the doldrum periods with Tennessee with regards to their offense. But I do think that they're a little bit less prone to them against a Marquette team that they do gamble for steals a little bit more. Marquette is not a team that's going to be able to dominate on the glass, and very encouraging for Tennessee after he played just 1 minute in the first game of the Maui Invitational. Toby Awaka was out there on the floor yesterday. You've got Josiah Jordan James, a nice stat suffer. Meanwhile, for Marquette, they're going to have the best guard out there on the floor. That'd be Tyler Kolek, someone who a season ago was able to give you 7 assists, 14 plus points per contest. He just does a little bit of everything for the team. You've been able to have such great production as well out of the ancillary pieces. Someone like David Joplin is able to come off the bench. He's able to bury a whole bunch of threes. You've been able to get a lot of production out of Cam Jones as well, who's been able to give you about 18 points per contest this far this season as well. But we did see them get a little bit neutralized in that game against UCLA. I'm doing this as we don't know the results of that Kansas game. And if you do get Kansas versus Tennessee, I'd be setting Kansas as a very, very slight favorite, probably about a 1 or so point favorite. And I mean, the winners will be matching up with each other as well. So I might actually be not necessarily taking a look at the third and fourth place game. I might actually be taking a look at the actual winner side of things as well. But if you do get like a Kansas versus Tennessee matchup, I think that Kansas, just with Hunter Dickinson, they'd be able to control that thing down low. And DeJuan Harris, he's just such an efficient guy with an assist-to-turnover ratio that's north of 3. You have your question marks with someone like a Johnny Furphy. You've got your question marks with Nicholas Timberlake. But all in all, I do think that Kansas has one of the highest floors in all of college basketball. Typically, Tennessee is a team that I put in that vein as well with their defense. But we all know the just sort of dead periods that you can go through with that Tennessee offense, even though they do have quite a bit more depth with Jordan Gainey coming in and being a nice 3-point shooter. And on top of that, they were able to get a little bit of an unexpected surprise with the fact that they already have Zakai Ziegler looking like the Zakai Ziegler of old as well. So that would be a spot where if we do get what I was thinking we were going to get off the top in a matchup like a Marquette versus Tennessee, I'd probably be setting that total more in the neighborhood about a 140, maybe a tad higher, maybe a tad lower. If you do get more like a Kansas versus Tennessee matchup, that'd be more in the neighborhood about a 143 to a 144-ish. And then in terms of the 7th versus 8th place game, I am able to report that we are going to be indeed getting Syracuse versus Chaminade, and that is going to be a spot where Syracuse is going to be a little bit north of a 20-point favorite. We've actually seen Chaminade give a little bit of fight. I do think that this is also the game where you probably want to be taking a look at an over as well. I recognize that Syracuse has had a rough go of it, but this is going to be a total that I set in the high 140s, perhaps even a 150, just because we see it time and time again in the Maui Invitational 8th place game. I mean, everyone is just running it and gutting it. Everyone is just having happy action, fun time, and everything like that. It's just a tradition unlike any other. And for Syracuse, they've got a very good backcourt. Judah Mintz, J.J. Starlin, these are a pair of guys that are able to do a nice job of being able to pack in the buckets in general. Starlin, he struggles a little bit from the outside, but he's able to give you right around like 5 boards. He's able to give you a few assists, multiple steals per contest. I think the big thing for Syracuse is just having the effectiveness of Naheem McLeod, who was able to give 4 blocks in that game against Gonzaga yesterday, but clearly the conditioning is a little bit off. He does get into some foul troubles, which is why he was limited to 20 minutes yesterday. And then for Chaminade, Wyatt Lowell, he's someone that began his career at Portland. He's 6'9", he's able to pop a few threes. And for the Silver Swords, they are looking to slow things down a little bit more, but typically in that 7th versus 8th place game, you do see things get cranked up tempo a little bit more. So if you do get Syracuse versus Chaminade, which I'm pretty sure we should be getting, that would be a spot where I would be setting Syracuse as about a 20 or so point favorite, give or take just a skoge, and that's a total where the total is going to be probably right around about a 150, maybe even a 151. And then in terms of the 5th versus 6th place game, you are going to be getting Gonzaga, and they're going to be playing UCLA, unless if my screen is reading wrong. And in terms of a Gonzaga versus UCLA matchup, I would be willing to set Gonzaga as about a 3.5 point favorite, depending upon how UCLA looks. This is one that is probably going to fluctuate a little bit as well, because I do want to see how UCLA looks on a Tuesday night before I really set a line on this one as well, because with regards to this UCLA team, it is a team that has been very much up and down with regards to the freshmen and how they've been able to play thus far. And you do have a few question marks in general with regards to this UCLA team, because with the Bruins, I do think that they are going to be able to get a lot more production moving forward out of their young guys. Ade Maedry is a 7'3" project of a player that I think is really going to be able to take some big strides moving forward, but having to go up against the unexpected versatility of Graham Ike, he's been able to sink some threes here in Maui. He's been able to show nice range. I think that that's going to be a little bit tough for him for this UCLA team. They're clearly playing some really good defense. We saw that on display against Marquette, but Dylan Andrews and guys like this, you do have your question marks there. Will McClendon, what are you going to be able to get out of them? Meanwhile, you've got Anton Watson, who for Gonzaga, he just is a nice stat sheet sufferer, was able to give you a double-double yesterday. He doesn't necessarily do one thing amazing for Gonzaga. Has been a career about 25% three-point shooter. I think that should rise this season, but he just does enough to be able to give you some solid scoring. He gives you like 3 assists. He gives you 6 rebounds. He's just a good glue guy in general, and I like the way that Ryan Nembhard is running the offense as well. Ryan Nembhard has done a solid job of being able to cut down on the turnovers. He had a little bit of an issue with that in the game against Syracuse, but you do have a little bit of depth with this team as well. Ben Gregg, tremendous name. He's been able to give you a little bit of production. Braden Huff, I like what I've seen out of him to begin the season. And for UCLA, just a very much team of mystery right now. I'd be setting this line as of right now between 3 and 3.5 with Gonzaga laying it in. Gonzaga actually looks a little bit more for real on defense. This is going to be a total where I'd be setting it more in the neighborhood about a 147.5 is my initial look. Again, do want to be taking a look at this just a skoge more, but right now I'm thinking that this total is going to be a situation to where a 147.5 or less, I'm going to be taking a look at the over, and a 148 or higher to the under, as Gonzaga appears to be playing a little bit more defense this season. So once again, subject to a little bit of change with regards to those handicaps. 733, 734 on the betting board. Sacramento State is going to be playing against Austin Peay. This is a part of the SoCal Challenge. Austin Peay between a 1.5 to a 2-point favorite, and your total between 131.5 and 132. And with Sacramento State, I made them a 2-point underdog, so being able to get a 1.5 on Austin Peay, I don't want to lay really anything more than 1.5 with Austin Peay, but I'm going to be willing to lay 1.5 with Austin Peay. Austin Peay brings in just so many guys with Corey Gibson coming over as their new coach. He's done a really good job of being able to elevate this program, and he's really been able to get the most out of guys like a DeMarcus Sharp, who was able to give the team a double-figure amount of points, shot well above 40% from three-point range a season ago. They do have a guy or two currently out of the fold due to the 2-time transfer rule, but all in all, this team has been able to do a very good job of being able to buy into what Corey Gibson is putting down. Meanwhile, for Sacramento State, this is a very slow and controlled team that needs to be valuing defense, and the defense just has not been online thus far this season. So that's a big giant issue for Sacramento State, as they have given up at least 75 points in every one of their games against a Division I opponent thus far this season. Duncan Boom Boom Powell has been able to do a solid job down low, giving you 14.5 points, 11.5 boards, but where in the heck is Akalma Wayne, who was able to be a starter last season? He was giving the team 6+ rebounds per game. He was pretty solid down low. He's been limited to 4 points and 2 rebounds per contest. You've got a nice sharpshooter in Austin Patterson, who he was over at Wofford a few seasons ago. ago where he was able to shoot about 44% from three-point range. He's been able to shoot about 42% from distance thus far this season, but he doesn't really give you a whole heck of a lot off the ball. In Sacramento State, it does feel like they're still searching for their point guard. Meanwhile, DeMarcus Sharp, he has been that guy for Austin Peay, being able to give out right around 5.8 assists, has been turning the ball over right around 3 times per contest, and Austin Peay going to need to get a little bit more down low. Sharp is the only guy that's giving you north of 5 rebounds per contest, but Daniel Luce, who's coming from the non-D1 level, he's been able to give you a little bit of rebounding as well. And with Javonte Black being able to contribute 13 points, shooting 37.5% from 3, I do think that Austin Peay going to be able to get it done in a game where I feel like the totals now went a little bit too low. I set my total at 132, so at a 131.5, looking at the over, and we'll take Austin Peay, willing to lay up to 1.5. 735, 736 on the betting board. Tarleton State is going to be playing against Cal State Bakersfield. Meet me for the Roadrunners, who find themselves as underdogs of between 4.5 and 5 points, seeing straight 4 out there as well. 137 to 138 is your total, and Tarleton State, I did set them as a 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay 4 to 4.5 with them. Tarleton State does such a tremendous job with their defense of being able to generate turnovers, and even when you do have some roster turnover, this is just a system that is very tried and true because you've got a whole is greater than the sum of its parts system, with skipped by Lou Williams being one of the primary scorers for this team. He's been able to do a solid job being able to contribute right in the neighborhood of about 12 to 13 points per contest each of the last 2 seasons. So I do like what he's able to bring to the table. And then I take a look at what you're able to get on the flip side for Cal State Bakersfield. This team does have Caleb Higgins, who does a nice job in the backcourt, 3.5 assists, 19 points per contest. And I did give Bakersfield a little bit of a bump up because they are playing in their home state. They just have not been able to find primary rebounders. Now, they do a good job of rebounding by committee. They've got 4 separate guys who will be able to give you at least 4 rebounds per game, including Modestas Concleres, a former top donor recruit of Creighton. But that said, for this Bakersfield team, not having a primary rebounder and shooting 27.5% from three-point range, that's very difficult to overcome against a Tarleton State team that has gotten really good production of Ja'Cory Smith, who's been able to log about 16.5 points, 2.2 steals per contest. Tarleton State as a whole, they do turn it over themselves right around 15.5 times per contest, but I do like the overall depth that you've got with this team. You've been able to get some nice production of Devin Barnes being able to chip in their 9 points per contest. Tarleton State able to go right around 8, even 9 deep at times, and I think that is going to be a little bit overwhelming for a Bakersfield team that has really been relying upon Higgins to be that trigger man. So I did set this line at 5. I'm going to be one lay between 4 and 4.5 here with Tarleton State. I did set my total at 135. Bakersfield, one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. Tarleton State, they really don't speed things up, and I'm going to be willing to take a look at this total under as well. 737, 738 on the betting board. UTEP and Bradley do battle from the SoCal Challenge. With UTEP, they are anywhere between 4 to 4.5 point underdogs. Totals between 137 and 138, and with this UTEP team, I did set them as a underdog of 4.5 points. So at the 4, not willing to lay anything more than 4, but I'm going to be willing to lay it with Bradley. They are in a little bit of transition after Rink Mass was really the guy that was able to elevate the team a season ago, but even without Rink Mass, you still have plenty of guys that are able to produce for this team. You've had Malevi Leons become the primary guy for this team. He's logging about 16 points, 7.5 boards, and at 6'9", he's able to let it fly from three-point range. He is headlining a team that is currently shooting about 37.5% from the outside. Now, the one key thing with Bradley is that the turnovers have been starting to become a little bit of an issue for them. 14 turnovers per contest. You do have Duke Dean in the backcourt who does a solid job of being able to dish out the ball. Last year gave the team 9.5 points, was able to dish out nearly 3 assists per contest, picking up right where he left off a season ago. And then when it comes to this UTEP team, this is a squad that they really do feast on all of these turnovers. Got Tay Hardy, who season ago was one of their primary scorers. He now has a little bit of help in the backcourt with Zed Boom Boom Powell. These two guys are combining for a little bit over 30 points per contest. And for UTEP, against D1 competition, they're shooting about 30% from 3. Overall, it's more like 36% from distance if you include the non-D1 teams, but they were a bottom 30 team last season in terms of three-point shooting percentage. They very much just feast on turnovers. They are generating over 12 steals per contest. They do a relatively solid job of taking care of the ball, but they don't have a ton down low. Other than Kelvin Solomon and Kevin Kalu, who's been able to give you about 6.8 rebounds per game. You really don't have anyone that's able to match up down low with having Leons and also getting about 6.5 boards per contest out of Darius Hannah. I do think that Bradley is going to be able to win the battle down low, and I do think that Bradley is going to be able to buckle up just a little bit in terms of the turnovers to be able to get this one done. I did set Bradley as a 4.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 4 with them, and did set my total 134.5. UTEP very much a defense-oriented team, and when it comes to Bradley, they're one of the slower teams in all of college basketball as well. So diving in on the under, and going to be willing to take Bradley. 739, 740 on the betting board. It is Tulane and Cal doing battle out there in the SoCal Challenge. You've got Tulane between a 5 to a 6.5 point favorite, total setting between 156 and 155.5. With regards to the total, I set mine at a 153. I'm going to be diving in on the under with Cal. We did see their offense be actually quite lively in that game against UTEP. That was very, very late. I think a little bit of a product of that was the defenses. It did feel like they were very, very sleepy, but I do like what you're getting out of Jalen Tyson. Tyson has been able to do a tremendous job. He'll be able to give the team 18 plus points. He's shipping in there a little bit over 8 rebounds per game, so he's a do-it-all player, but you also have that on the flip side for Kevin Cross. Kevin Cross for Tulane has been able to be just absolutely amazing with his 18 points, 8.5 boards, 4.5 assists, shooting north of 40% from three-point range. Zion James's stat sheet suffer that's able to give you 5.5 boards, ship it in there 14.5 points per contest, and overall, this is a Tulane team that does a good job of not just playing up-tempo, but playing up-tempo really in control, because they're only turning the ball over 9.5 times per contest after they were number 1 in the country last year in terms of total possessions per game. They've gotten a little bit more out of Greg Glenn III. He comes in from Michigan. He's been able to do a solid job, be able to log about 5 points, 4 boards per contest as well, and this is a Tulane team that overall as a by-committee team is able to dole out the ball. You've got 4 separate guys that will be able to give you at least 2 assists per contest, even when Jalen Forbes was out of the fold for a game or two to begin the season. They were still able to have good ball movement, and this is a California team that, in general, they are just trying to find their way in terms of backcourt. Jalen Celestine, I know that he's been dealing with a little bit of injury along with Devin Askew, which Devin Askew just has not been able to find himself in the backcourt as well, but can Cal get the most out of Fardaws Aimaq is the question. He was able to log about 19 points, 13.5 boards 2 seasons ago over at Utah Valley, playing under Mark Madsen. Feels like he's just not been able to get back to that same level. And I do think that Tulane, with just all the weapons that they've got along the perimeter, going to be able to get it done against a Cal team that is still working on their offense a little bit. So I did set my number at a 153 for this total. Going to be taking a look at the under. And with Tulane, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 6.5 with them. 741, 742 on the betting board. This is from the Cancun Challenge. We do know that Southern Illinois is going to be in this game. We don't know whether it's going to be Fresno State or New Mexico State. So they made my job very, very difficult on this one. So obviously no numbers up on this game. But if it's Fresno State versus Southern Illinois, I'd be setting Southern Illinois as about a 7.5 point favorite with a total of 133.5. So 133 or less. Looking at the over 134 or higher. Going to be taking a look at the under end. If they play against New Mexico State, that total probably goes into the very high 130s, the very low 140s, but that'd be another circumstance where I'd probably be setting Southern Illinois as a favorite, but I'd probably be setting that number more in the neighborhood of about 3, maybe 4, depends upon how that New Mexico State versus Fresno State game goes, as that was a little bit of a late one. And as I am recording, I last saw New Mexico State in the lead in that one, so I'm sort of thinking that you're going to get Fresno State, but we shall see what happens there. With this Fresno State team, they did bring in Xavier DuSell, who was able to shoot it quite well from three-point range, but I'm just not necessarily fully bought in on this Fresno State team. They've been, in my opinion, quite a bit overvalued to begin the season. You've had Isaiah Hill be able to dole out 7 assists per contest, but they're turning the ball over north of 15 times per game. They're shooting 40% from 3 after last season. They were one of the worst three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball, but now they have to go up against a Southern Illinois team that is one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game for Southern Illinois as well. They've been able to find a true just go-to guy in Xavier Johnson. Xavier Johnson has been able to do a nice job giving you 15 plus points per contest. Was a very passive guy a season ago, but I do think that he's going to be able to elevate his game moving forward. The big key is, what are you going to be able to get out of the ancillary pieces? Because you've got in the backcourt Trent Brown, who's been able to give you about 9.5 points per contest. It's always been a mid-30s three-point shooter, but it's all been about Clarence Rupert down low. He was limited to just 10 minutes yesterday due to foul trouble, and they really don't have a lot past that. You've got Abibi who's able to give you a few rebounds, so it does cause for a little bit of question mark. But if we do get the Fresno State versus Southern Illinois matchup, I'd be willing to lay up to 7 with Southern Illinois. 8 or more would be willing to take the points with Fresno State, and then 133 or less looking at the over, 134 or higher to the under. If they play against New Mexico State, I'd probably only be willing to lay up to about 3.5 to 4 with Southern Illinois before I'd be willing to take the points with New Mexico State, and that total would be rising to the high 130s. And then 743, 744, James Madison will be going up against mystery opponent, again, New Mexico State or Fresno State. I'm thinking it's going to be New Mexico State, and if it is James Madison versus New Mexico State, set James Madison as a 7.5 point 7-point favorites. I would be willing to lay up to 7 there, 8 or more, taking the points with New Mexico State. And 151 or less, looking at the over 152 or higher. Going to be taking a look at the under, and with New Mexico State, the team is starting to get their pieces back as they were without to begin the season. Some of those two-time transfers that were in need of getting a waiver, and I do think that being able to get just a go-to scorer that was very solid over at Pittsburgh and Femi Odakala is big for this New Mexico team because he's been able to give this team a little bit of rebounding. We saw him put up 12 points per contest in the ACC just a few seasons ago. And Robert Carpenter, one of the few guys from Mississippi Valley State over the last few seasons that has actually become something. I remember when I was there, he was averaging like 16.5 points per contest. He had 6'7", is a nice three-point shooter for this team. Meanwhile, with the Dukes of James Madison, this team has been a little bit fortunate with some of the shots that they've been popping, and they have been just so high-powered with regards to this offense. They are playing at one of the fastest paces in all of college basketball. They do a good job of being able to take away the ball as well. I do think that we're going to see a little bit of a fall-off with regards to some of their shooting, but even when we do see that fall-off, I do think that they're good enough to be able to maintain because they are about 8 to 9 deep. You've got a very nice go-to scorer in Terrell Edwards, who's been able to do a solid job of being able to give this team darn near 20 points per contest, and now you've got more rebounding with TJ Bickerstaff coming in from Boston College. He's been able to log right around 8.5 rebounds per game. You've got just a team in general that does a good job of being able to hold it all. You've got a trio of different guys that are able to give you 2+ assists per contest. The team as a whole is averaging right around 10 steals per game and shooting about 39% from three. Again, I think that is going to be going downward just a little bit. Michael Green III shooting 43.5% from three I don't think is going to be withstanding, but I also do think that they've got a little bit of upside guy in Quincy Allen who comes in from Colorado, former top 200 recruit that just couldn't stay out there on the floor. So it will be a spot where against New Mexico State, we'll be setting James Madison as a 7-point favorite, 8 or more, taking a look at the New Mexico State Aggies, and then 151 or less, looking at the over 152 or higher to the under end. If it is Fresno State, against Fresno State, I would set James Madison more around about an 11-point favorite, and that total would be slashed to more around about a 146 to a 147. 745, 746 on the betting board. It is West Virginia and Virginia doing battle from Fort Myers, and with Virginia, they are between 9 and 10-point favorites, and your total is 117.5, and I just can't get behind this low of a total. I'm going to be taking a look at the over. I recognize that Virginia is always one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. I recognize that Virginia looked very, very grody in their game a few days ago, but I think we've went a little bit too far. Right now, Virginia is playing at a clip of about 63 possessions per game. Even if you get just under a point per possession, you're going to be able to get this over. So I do think that this is a little bit overreactionary. West Virginia has looked horrible, by the way. I mean, with West Virginia, when you've got Kirk Reese out of the fold, when you've got just the mass exodus that we've seen in the offseason with Bob Huggins being now out of the fold and everything like that, that is rough. As for West Virginia, they're looking in the front court for their production. Quinn Slazinski has become Mr. Do-It-All after he was a solid but not great player at Iona last season. 16 points, 4.5 boards, 3 assists, shooting 44% from three. Jesse Edwards, double-double machine, 15 points, right around 10 boards, 2 blocks per contest. And I actually do like what you're able to get. Seth Wilson, among qualifying players in all of college basketball last year, had the best assist-to-turnover ratio in all of college basketball, but with Virginia, I did set them as an 8.5-point favorite here at the 9 to 9.5, going a little bit too far, but I do think that Virginia should be able to take control of this game with Reed Speakman doing a very solid job in the backcourt, being able to log right around 6 assists, 3 steals, 12 points per contest, and Virginia has been able to generate more steals this year than they have in the past. You've also been able to get just below 3 steals per contest on Ryan Dunn, who's gotten her done with about 7 boards per contest. Reason why I just can't take Virginia to be able to cover this big of numbers because, for one, it is going to be a low possession game, and for two, I do think that they're going to get land-based on glass. You just don't have the size with guys even like a Francisco Cafaro that you had a season ago. It is a Virginia team shooting about 38.5% from three, just 8 turnovers per contest, but you just never know what you're going to get night in and night out this Virginia team. The defense has certainly been there, giving up 70 points or fewer in every single game thus far this season, while West Virginia, their defense has been a little bit inconsistent. They have given up 70 plus in 2 out of their last 3 games, SMU and Monmouth. So those are not necessarily the world's greatest of teams. And if you do have a game that is about a 7-point differential with about a minute remaining, you are going to be able to get some late game following as well. So I do feel like you are going to have both of these teams knock down enough shots to be able to get this total over. So my total at a 124.5. So look it over and keep in mind a lot more fouls are being called this year than in past years in college basketball as well. So I do think that that's going to be a little bit of a booster and makes it very tough to take any total this low under. And with regards to the spread, I did set Virginia as an 8.5 point favorite, so here at 9 or more, going to be taking a look at the points with West Virginia. 747, 748 on the betting board. It is Wisconsin, and they're going to be playing against SMU. This is also from Fort Myers, and with Wisconsin, they're between 6.5 and 7 point favorites. Totals ending between 143.5 and 145. So Wisconsin has a 7.5 point favorite. So here at the 7, I am going to be willing to lay the number with Wisconsin. You've been able to have Stephen Kroll and Tyler Wall do a very solid job down low. Both of these guys are able to give you right around 7 rebounds per game. And SMU doesn't do a bad job in the post. You've been able to get Samuel Williamson to be able to chip in there right around 6.5 boards per contest. Who, I mean, man, that guy has been in college basketball for forever. But still, with SMU, the biggest issue that you have is that the team really doesn't knock down a lot of threes. They brought in Chuck Harris from Butler, and that has been able to elevate the team, shooting 45.5% from 3, 14 points per contest. But Zarique Phillips, he's been able to give you 14 points, 5 boards, 3.5 assists. He's also shooting 9.5% from 3. Is he going to shoot better than 9.5% from 3? Absolutely, but at the same time, he's a career less than 27% 3-point shooter in his own right, more like 27.5%, maybe lowballed him just a touch, but he has never really been a guy that could take over from the outside. You need a little bit more out of someone like a Jalen Smith, who's been able to log about 5 points per contest, was a starter a season ago, but has never really been able to elevate his offensive game. And Wisconsin certainly has their offensive inconsistencies as well. AJ Storr has been able to come in, and he's been able to restore a little bit of that with 14 points per contest. Not shooting it well from 3 after he shot about 40% from distance while at St. John's. And you always notice Wisconsin does have some pretty demonstrative home and road splits with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, but Chucky Hepburn has been able to give you some nice facilitation. You never know what you're going to get out of him on the offensive side of things, as he's averaging about 11 points per contest. One night it'll be 20, the next night it'll be like 4, but he has been able to do a solid job of being able to find someone like Max Kleesman, who a season ago shot 38% from 3 in space as well. I do think that Wisconsin just has more weapons than this SMU team, and for SMU, while they do have Samuel Williamson doing a solid job down low and they've got versatility, I think that they're going to lose the battle on the glass, and with Wisconsin's big men, they also do a good job of being able to shot the ball as well. The total just seems way too high. I set mine at a 135.5. SMU, not a very efficient offensive team, not a very up-tempo team in general, and for this Wisconsin bunch, they have been able to crank up the defense a little bit more, giving up 72 points of fear in each other last 3 games after that harebrained Arkansas game. I feel like threw off their metrics just a little bit. So going in on the under and going to be taking a look at Wisconsin, willing to lay up to 7 with them, 749, 750 on the betting board. Oregon State is going to be playing against Baylor. This is from Brooklyn, New York. Oregon State is a underdog of between 15.5 and 16.5 points. Totals between 142.5 and 143. And with Oregon State, I did set them as a 16.5 point underdog. Here at the 15.5, I'm going to be willing to lay it. Opener was 16, and that would be the max I'd be willing to go on this one. But with regards to Baylor, you just have so many weapons that Oregon State is going to need to account for. You've had Jacoby Walter be able to do a nice job with 18 points, 5 boards, shooting 39% from 3-point range. Has come in as a freshman, has been one of the most impactful freshmen in all of college basketball. And then Ray J. Dennis, the transfer from Toledo, to be able to give out right around 5.5 assists per contest. Now, the 4.3 turnovers per game is a little bit of an issue. Baylor has had about 14 turnovers per game. Fortunately for them, they go up against an Oregon State team that really doesn't generate a bunch of steals, a bunch of turnovers. And for Oregon State, if you look at the offensive output, they've scored 80-plus points in 3 out of their last 4 games. It's why you take a look at points on a per-possession basis rather than a per-game basis, because the Troy game went to double overtime. The App State game went to overtime as well, and that very much warps their numbers and makes them look like an actual respectable offense. Like Jordan Pope is averaging 20.5 points per contest. Much of that has been coming in overtime. Oregon State overall is shooting about 30% from 3-point range. They do an okay job of being able to take care of the ball, but you really only have one rebounder for this team, and that would be Mr. Tyler Bladue, who's been able to give you about 8.5 boards, 15 points per contest. Nobody else on the team is really giving you north of 5 boards per contest. Christian Wright, who comes in for Georgia, has dealt with a bunch of injuries and just has never been able to live up to his billing. And then you've got a lot of athleticism and ability. And Yves Misi, he comes in as a true freshman. He's been able to give you 8.5 points, 5 boards, 7-footer that is able to shore things up down low. Jalen Bridges has had nice versatility for Baylor as well. Baylor, I feel like, just outguns Oregon State in pretty much every facet of basketball. I like what Pope is able to do for Oregon State, but that's really the lone redeeming quality that this team has. So going to be willing to lay up to 16 with Baylor. And with regards to the total, I did set it at a 142.5. Baylor is a team that is very much able to put the ball in the basket, Flip side, you've got yourself a Oregon State team that, well, it has been eluding them. And again, I do think that their offensive numbers very much warped by the fact that they went to so many overtimes. So going to be taking a look at the 143 under and going to be one to lay up to 16 with Baylor. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. 751, 752. Pittsburgh is going to be playing against Florida. This is out there at the Barclays Center with Florida. They find themselves as 2.5 to 3.5 point favorites. Your total is between 156, seeing as high as a 157.5, and with Florida, could only make them a 1 point favorite. So being able to get north of a point, I'm going to be willing to take a shot here with Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, I do think, is going to be able to do a solid job of holding up against a Florida team that has much more in the backcourt this season than they did a season ago. You've got Zion Pullen, who is now back from injury. He had 15 points, 5 boards in his Florida debut. Riley Kugel, who really took hold towards the back half of the season last year. He's been able to give the team 14 points per contest, and Florida as a whole is going to need to improve on the 61% free throw shooting, but they've got Micah Hanglon down low, who's able to give you 8.5 rebounds per game. But what is concerning with this Florida team as well, the 14.8 turnovers per game. I do think with Zion Pullen getting back to the fold, that's going to be able to help them out because they've been having Walter Clayton as that main trigger man, who was able to be a very solid off-the-ball scorer while I own a season ago, shooting 43% from 3, 17 points per contest, 3 assists per game. But it was really Dennis Jenkins who is more the main facilitator there, so that'll take the load off of him. But for Pittsburgh, I do think that they're going to be able to hold up down low with Federico, and what he's been able to do, 7.5 points, 7.5 boards. He's able to give you 3 blocks per contest. And then the emergence of this freshman in Carlton Carrington. He's been one of the biggest surprises in all of college basketball. Led off his college basketball career with a triple-double in game number 1 against, I believe it was North Carolina A&T. He's been able to log 18 points, 6 assists, 5.5 rebounds. Shooting north of 50% from 3. We should see a little bit of fall off there, but Blake Hinson, his 6'6" versatility, being able to shoot 40% from 3, chipping in there north of 16 points per contest. That's big, along with the coming of age of the Diaz-Graham brothers, who are both able to do a solid job of being able to hit the glass. Both of these guys are able to pop threes. You've got tons of versatility for this Pittsburgh team, and I think that Florida's going to have a tough time matching up with it. I'm willing to take Florida outright here, but I can only make the line 1, so being able to get any sort of points whatsoever with Pittsburgh, I'm going to be taking a look at those, and I did set my total more around a 147. Florida's actually been halfway decent with their defense. They did a nice job holding up against Florida State a few days ago, and for Pittsburgh, having Federico down low, having just a lot of size in general, I do think is going to cause some issues for Florida, and we have seen Pittsburgh give up 60 points or fewer in 3 out of their 4 games as far this season. So diving in on the under and going to be looking at the points with Pittsburgh. Now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306, 545, 306, 546. It is Colgate, and they're going to be playing against Harvard. Harvard finds themselves as underdogs of 4 points, and your total on this game, it is anywhere between 136 and 136.5, and with Colgate, I did set them as a 4-point favorite. So we're going to be looking for a little bit of line movement here. This is a total that I did set out at 142. I'm going to be taking a look at the over with Colgate. Out of the last 3 seasons, they have been in the top 5 in 3-point shooting percentage in every single one of them. I do think that there's going to be a little bit of a fall off this season, but I do like what Braden Smith is able to bring to the table. Braden Smith, he's a very explosive do-it-all guy who's been able to really take over the mantle for guys like Nelly Cummings, Tucker Richardson, who has become that featured guy over at Colgate. 15.5 points, 6.5 boards, 5.5 assists, 2.2 steals per contest. He is 21.5% 3-point shooting, should be going northward, and you'll be able to get some good versatility and scoring out of Ryan Moffitt. 6'7" gentleman that last season, actually the last 2 seasons, shot 45% from 3, right around 41% from distance this season. Then Keegan Records pulling in their 8.5 rebounds, should be able to take Justice Ajabor to task, who also for Harvard has been able to give you right around 8.5 boards per contest. Question for this Harvard team, what are you going to be able to get out of someone like a Lewis Lesman, who missed darn near all of last season due to injury, has come back, shot 40% from 3 with 10 points per contest thus far, and the true freshman in the Mack truck, Malik Mack, 21 points, 4 boards, 5 assists. Is that going to be lasting or not? Because he's off to an absolutely amazing start. Highly touted guy, but this Harvard team last season was one of the more rough 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. Currently, they're shooting 38.5% from the outside. I do think that there's going to be a little bit of a fall off there, and also with this Colgate team, even though their 3-point shooting isn't quite what it was a season ago, they do have a little bit more versatility in general as well. So I do like Colgate being able to cover anything of 3.5 or less. Like I said, at the 4, it's a little bit of a wait and see. If we get north of 4, going to be taking a look at the points with Harvard, but did set my total at 142, so going to be taking a look at the over. 306, 547, 306, 548. Presbyterian is going to be playing us to Tennessee Tech. Tennessee Tech is anywhere between a 7 to an 8-point underdog, and your total is between 140 and 140.5. Did set my total 139.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the under with the Tennessee Tech bunch. They lose so much of their explosive scoring from a season ago, which is going to lead to their offense just not being what it was a season ago. You have been able to get some nice production out of Rodney Johnson Jr. has been able to do a nice job being able to give the team 13 points per contest. And then on the flip side for Presbyterian, Samaj Teal has come in and has been pretty solid. 14 points, 3 assists, shooting 53.5% from three-point range. We should see a little bit of a fall for Presbyterian. They have been a tad bit fortunate with the way that they've gotten some shots to be able to fall for them, but I do like the pickup that they had as well of Jamarier Harvey. He comes in from UNC Wilmington. For Wilmington, he was a starter in his beginning part of his tenure. Last season was a little bit more of an afterthought, but a career about 34% three-point shooter at 6'4". He's not a guy that's going to give you a whole bunch of rebounding or anything like that, but is able to space the floor, something that Presbyterian just direly needed. Presbyterian doesn't have a ton of rebounding. Right now, the guy that's leading the way is Kobe Stewart with about 5.5 rebounds per contest, so Tennessee Tech is going to need to look to be able to feature a little bit more of their big man, as they themselves don't necessarily have a ton of size as well. You've been able to have Mr. Early come in, David Early from Marshall, and he's been able to give the team right around about 10 points per contest. Javarius Harvey has been able to chip in there about 10.5 points per contest as well, but not necessarily a guy that's able to pound down low. Daniel Ijabuni, hopefully I said that correctly, has been able to give you about 5 boards as a 6'7" gentleman, so that's been a little bit helpful, and I do think the Presbyterian should be able to do a solid job of not having their Achilles heel exposed, but at the same time, I do expect this Presbyterian offense to cool down a little bit as well. Neither of these teams are necessarily playing super duper up tempo, and I do think that moving forward, Tennessee Tech should be able to get a little bit more out of Deontay Wood as well, someone who's just dealt with injuries throughout his career, but it's always been about a 6.5+ point per game score, and I do think that he's going to be able to recover after missing a little bit of time towards the beginning part of the season due to injury. So I did set this line at 5.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Tennessee Tech, and make my total 139.5, so diving in on the under. 306-549, 306-550. Sam Houston State is going to be playing against Grambling. This is from Trojan Arena, so neutral court environment. Grambling, an underdog of between 9.5 and 11 points, and your totals between 137.5 and 138.5 with Grambling. I did set them as a 9-point underdog, so being able to get north of 9, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Grambling. Last season, they were a top 20 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I don't think that there's any way that they duplicate that this season, but I do like the overall upside of this team. You do bring back Trey Michael Morton, who has been in the program for seemingly 500 years. He's done a very solid job. I'll be able to give the team a double-figure amount of points per game while being able to chip in their 3.6 assists per contest. It is a Grambling team that last season did have a little bit of a woe with regards to three-point shooting percentage. That this year has been translated into a 25% three-point shooting percentage. That should be going northward, as you do have Contavious Dozier, who's been able to do a solid job with in the neighborhood about 14.5 points, 3.5 boards, just has not been able to knock down threes. And on the flip side, for the Sam Houston State team, they're a little bit of a new look team as well. Their coach and Jason Hooten decided to take the New Mexico State job, and they lose a lot of their big pieces from a season ago, including Mr. Do-It-All and Qua Grant, though. They ran about a 8 or 9 deep rotation a season ago. They do bring back pretty much 4 guys that saw meaningful minutes a season ago, including Lamar Wilkerson, who last season shot 37.5% from threes, up to 41% from distance. Thus far this season, Jaden Ray has done a good job doling out about 5.5 assists per contest, but for Sam Houston State, you can tell that they're just out of sorts in terms of taking care of the ball. 14 turnovers per game. Last season, they were one of the worst free throw shooting teams in all of college basketball as well. The team is actually doing a very solid job of being a rebound by committee. You've got 5 separate guys that will be able to give you at least 4.2 rebounds per game, so that's going to be difficult for Grambling to match up with. But with Jonathan Koo, the transfer from Stephen F. Austin, being able to chip in there right around 7 boards per contest, I do think that they're going to be able to hold up on the glass, and that'll allow them to be able to hold up in this game. I did set my line at 9. I'm going to be willing to take the points, and with Grambling, I think that they're going to get back to their defensive ways. So my total 133, so diving in on the under and the points. 306-551, 306-552. UT Martin is going to be playing us in North Alabama. North Alabama finds themselves as an underdog of a point, and your total is between 150.5 and 151.5, and with North Alabama, I did set them as a underdog of 3.5 points. So I'm going to be taking a look at UT Martin laying just a single point. With UT Martin, this team has got some really good guard play, but they've always had a little bit of an issue trying to find a little bit down low. They are in a bit of transition after last season. Parker Stewart was really that go-to scorer for them. He was able to log 16 plus points per contest. Now it's all about Jordan Sears and what he's able to do, and he's been able to do a nice job of being the main man. 19 points, 3.5 assists, currently shooting 47.5% from three-point range. That should certainly be taking a little bit of a fall off. And on the flip side for North Alabama, with Daniel Ortiz on the level, that meant that KJ Johnson, who's been a primary facilitator, has actually been taken off the ball, and he's become more of a designated scorer. 16.5 points, shooting 40% from three-point range. They've been looking to Jakari Lane to do a little bit more facilitation after he, a season ago, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, was a solid score. 12.5 points, 3.5 assists per contest. So they're in a little bit of transition with regards to that backcourt. Now, with North Alabama, they're going to have the best low-post player in this game in Demaine Forrest, who's been able to give you 8.5 points, 8.5 boards per contest. But for UT Martin, I don't think that this is going to be withstanding. But Jacob Cruz, who comes in from North Florida and the non-Division I level, 15 points, 10 boards. He has resurfaced, and he has looked really good once again. Do think that there is going to be a little bit of a fall off there, but the overall versatility that you get out of 6'9" Isa Muhammad is big as well. Was a former top 20 junior college transfer before heading to New Mexico State last season. He was part of that sticky situation, but at the D1 level, 9.5 points, 5 boards, showed a little bit of versatility a season ago. I do think that that is going to be a hard guard for this North Alabama team, and I do think that with UT Martin being able to have so many guys that are able to pop threes, having a team that really does play at a little bit of a blistering pace, that is going to take it out of North Alabama. North Alabama is a team that is in the bottom 75 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis a season ago. Their defense has been much better thus far, but that has been because of the competition that they have been playing. Meanwhile, with this UT Martin team, they certainly have given up their points, given up at least 72 points in every single game thus far this season. So I do think that this is going to be a game that's turned up tempo. So my total 155.5 going with the over, and with UT Martin, I do think that their versatility and ability to knock down threes going to be able to win out. I'm going to be willing to lay it with UT Martin and going to be taking a look at this total over 306.553, 306.554. Louisiana Tech plays host to McNeese. McNeese is an underdog of 6.5 points. Your total on this game is 145, and with McNeese State, I did set them as an underdog of 6.5 points, so we're going to be waiting for some more numbers to come out, because right now only DraftKings has a number up on this one. I believe that McNeese played yesterday, which is a big reason why we currently don't have a number up on this game. But with regards to this total, did set mine at a 144.5, so at a 145, that is my buy point on the under. Got a Louisiana Tech team that's really looking to hone in on their defense against a relatively up-tempo Southern Utah team yesterday. They held them to just 53 points, was a masterclass in defense for them. They do lose some of their top scorers like a Kobe Williams from a season ago, but now you've got Daniel Bacho in the fold. Daniel Bacho began his career over at Arizona, Texas Tech. Not a big man that's going to stretch the floor and is able to pop threes, but a former top 100 recruit that is able to do a nice job being able to give the team 6+ boards per contest. You've got Isaiah Crawford, Mr. Do-It-All at 6'6", season ago, 13.5 points, shot 42% from 3, 2.5 assists, 5.5 rebounds per game. He's picking up right where he left off last season, and now you've got a primary scorer in Jalen Henderson that you're able to really dive in on, a non-Division I transfer that has come in, has been able to give this team north of 50% three-point shooting, with going into yesterday, 17 points per contest, and Devon Magnum, the transfer from Radford, at 6'8", he's been able to do a nice job, long in their 7+ boards, capable of being able to shoot threes as well. And then for McNeese, you love the pieces that they brought in. At the same time, you tell that there might be some issues with regards to the chemistry. They have been able to stay undefeated thus far, so you give them credit where credit is due. Saints at loss against Western Carolina, which they lose by 2, so they're undefeated against the spread. But Shada Wells, he's been able to give the team about 18 points per contest, shooting in the high 40s from three-point range, about 44% from the outside going into yesterday. Love what Christian Schulmade is able to do down low, but you have something like an Ontavion Collum, who was the main guy over at Cal State Bakersfield. Wells certainly was at UT Arlington a few seasons ago. He's used to taking a backup role while he was over at TCU 8 seasons ago, but you do have to wonder how all these pieces are going to be coexisting in general. That's a big question mark that I do have with this team, or else I probably would be setting this line a little bit closer to 3. So here at a 6.5, it's wait and see mode. 6 or less, willing to lay it with Louisiana Tech, 7 or more. Going to be willing to take the points with McNeese, and with this total here at a 145, it is my buy point on the under. 306.555, 306.556. American is going to be playing with Mount St. Mary's. The Mount is between a 2 to a 3-point favorite, and your total on this game, finding it anywhere between 137.5 and 138.5. American was one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball season ago, and Mount St. Mary's just really never is up-tempo. This is a bunch that they play at a little bit of a slog of a pace, and I do think that we're going to be seeing much more of that moving forward. As for American, I did set them as a 2.5-point favorite, so here now that we're getting to more of a 3-point line, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Mount St. Mary's. Mount St. Mary's certainly is a team that lacks a lot of 3-point shooting pop, with Jalen Benjamin, their top scorer from a season ago, being out of the fold, but I do think that they're going to be able to get a little bit more moving forward out of one of their main men in Dakota LaFew. He, season ago, was able to do a nice job shooting about 38% from 3-point range, 13 points per contest. Now has the ball in his hands a little bit more, but I do think that he's going to be able to step up along with Josh Reeves, who has been a nice off-the-ball player the last few seasons. needs to give this team just a little bit more in terms of aspects of not scoring, because he has never really averaged more than 2.5 rebounds or an assist per contest, but has been able to put the ball in the basket with 9 points per contest. This is not a traditional Mount St. Mary's team with a bunch of size, but you do have George Tinsley, who's able to give you about 5.5 to 6 rebounds per game. Ron Jessamy has come in as a true freshman at 6'8". He's been able to do a solid job of being able to lend 5 boards per contest as well. And they go up against an American team that has the versatility of Matt Rogers, who's been able to log about 15.5 points, 5.5 boards, shot 40% from 3-point range a season ago. Has seen a little bit of a fall off there, but this is also an American team that is looking to turn over a new leaf after they were in the bottom 15 last season in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Only about 11.5 turnovers per game thus far this season, but I do have a fear that that's going to crop up a little bit more. We have seen Elijah Stevens be able to step up with 6.5 assists, 1.6 turnovers per contest. You do have to be asking how much of that was a byproduct of playing against the likes of NJIT, Siena, Georgetown, teams that in general just really don't put any pressure on the ball whatsoever, while you've got a Mount St. Mary's team that's been able to generate about 8 steals per contest. I do think that Mount St. Mary's going to be able to do a good job of being able to generate some turnovers. Both of these teams perennially slow, controlled teams. I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a slog for either team to be able to get the ball in the basket, so I'm going to be taking a look at this total under. I set my total at a 132.5, and with my line at 2.5 at a 3 or more, I'm going to be willing to take the points with amount 306.557, 306.558. Merrimack is going to be playing those to North Carolina A&T. This is a actual neutral court game over at Pete Hanna Center, with Merrimack a 5.5 to a 6.5 point favorite. Total is ending between 136.5 and 137.5. Did set my line at 6. We are right in the middle of it, but I'm going to tell you, if I have a choice between 5.5 and 6.5, I'd rather lay 5.5 with Merrimack rather than take 6.5 with North Carolina A&T. And this is even despite the fact that Jordan DeCock, who might be the top overall player for Merrimack, he's most likely not going to be playing in this game. He took a spell in their game against Maine a few weeks ago and has not been seen ever since then. Someone that's able to grab you a few rebounds, is able to pop it from 3-point range, but I do think that this is just a rough spot in general for a North Carolina A&T team that just has not been able to find any semblance of offense this far this season for North Carolina A&T, other than a game against Greensboro in which they scored 78 points. It's been a rough go of it for them. Scored 52 points against Pittsburgh, 51 points against Virginia. Certainly a little bit of that is a byproduct of the competition being played against, but you're really going to need to have the Duke be able to step up. Kyle Duke, who's been able to give you about 10.5 points per contest this far this season, coming off of just scoring 3 points per game last season, is a career about 38.5% 3-point shooter to be able to help things out, but this team also does not have a single guy averaging more than 4.7 rebounds per game. They're really looking to see who's going to be able to help out in the backcourt. Kamon Shell, who's been able to do a nice job doling out the ball. He's been able to give you 4.7 assists, about 8 points per contest, but nobody has really stepped up to be able to offer him a little bit more of a target and a guy that'd be able to bail him out, and they have to go up against a Merrimack team that always swarms to the ball. They're averaging once again right around 10 steals per contest. You've got Devon Savage, who's been able to give you a double-figure amount of points, and Adam Clark, as a true freshman, has been amazing. I know that a lot of people have been buzzing around him in NEC circles. 12 points per game. Not a guy that really is able to shoot threes, but just very much fits the system. And then you've got Samba Diallo, someone who began his career over at the likes of Manhattan along with UMass. He's a guy that is able to run the floor, is able to give you some good rebounding, but also has some active hands. Has logged over a steal per contest each of the last 2 seasons. Is picking up right where he left off for Merrimack. Currently, they're shooting 25% from 3. It never is their forte. It never will be their forte. I think that they'll shoot better than 25% from 3 moving forward, but this is a bunch that I do think is going to be able to get it done with being able to force those turnovers and just making things rough in general for this North Carolina A&T team. So it is a spot where I did set A&T as a 6-point underdog. Will be willing to lay up to 5.5 with Merrimack, and did set my total at a 128. North Carolina A&T just out of scoring options right now, so looking at the under and looking at Merrimack laying up to a 5.5. 36.559, 36.560. Northern Kentucky is playing against Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Corpus Christi is an underdog of between 6 and 7 points. Total on this game, finding it anywhere between 143 and 144. And with Corpus Christi, I did set them as an underdog of 9.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay it with Northern Kentucky. Northern Kentucky has a backcourt that I really like. Now, they have been very inconsistent on the glass this far this season, but I do think that they're going to be able to do a little bit of a better job with that aspect as well. You've got a Northern Kentucky team that has Sam Vincent, who's been able to be Mr. Versatile for the team thus far this season. He's able to give you about 2 steals per contest, 6 boards, 2.5 assists. Really like his game in tandem with Marcus Warwick. Warwick last season was the primary scorer, just below 19 points per contest, as a part of a team that was in the bottom 35 nationally in terms of total possessions per game. Now, down low, they are going to be looking for a little bit more rebounding out of Trey Robinson, who's been able to give you about 6.5 boards per contest. Was a starter last season that was able to be a relatively solid glue guy, 7 points, 4 boards, steal per game, and then on the other side for Texas A&M Corpus Christi, very much a new look team. You have a bunch of guys from last season being out of the fold. On top of that, Mr. Lutz, Steve Lutz, he takes that job over at Western Kentucky, so you do have to replace a lot of these pieces, but at the same time, they do retain a few guys from a season ago that should be helping out Marion Humphrey. Humphrey comes in from UT Arlington, where he was a part-time starter a season ago, and he's been able to do a nice job of being able to pass around the rock thus far. 6.5 points, 3.5 assists per contest, very much a little bit more of a passive guy, but Owen Dees has been able to take the load off of him. Dees was a little bit more of an understudy season ago that was able to average 5 points per contest off the bench. Now has been able to give the team 10 points per game, 6'8", currently shooting about 40% from three-point range with Corpus Christi. They still do have a little bit of a turnover issue with right around 13.5 turnovers per contest, but they still do a good job generating steals, right around 12 per contest. That is very much a warped number because they played against 2 teams that are not of the Division I level, so that has allowed them to be able to collect a lot there. And for the Northern Kentucky team, it has been difficult for them to be able to get their offense going. 67 points or fewer in all 3 of their games against Division I competition. Once again, they played against DePaul, a non-Division I team, to be able to bolster their numbers just a little bit. But I do think that this is an ordeal where we are going to be able to see Northern Kentucky force some turnovers on a Corpus Christi team that gets a little bit loose with the ball, and a Corpus Christi team that is in quite a bit of transition as well. So it is a spot where I'm going to be willing to lay up to 9 with Northern Kentucky. Northern Kentucky, also one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball in terms of possessions per game, losing a little bit of scoring pop from last season. Did set my total at 141.5, so going to be diving in on the under, and I'm going to be diving in on Northern Kentucky. 306-561, 306-562. UMass is going to be playing us to Central Connecticut. Central Connecticut is an underdog between 11 and 12 points, and your total on this game is anywhere between 148.5 and 149.5. With UMass, I did set them as a favorite of 12 points. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 11.5 with them. With this UMass team, it is a bunch that has really been able to take on the personality of Frank Martin. Frank Martin is a no-nonsense, tough guy who's been able to do a good job of being able to coach up his team in general. And when he had a full allotment of guys out there on the floor, it was a top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That very much went downhill when he had all the injuries take hold, but gotta love what Rasul Douglas, the UConn transfer, has been able to do with about 16 points per contest, shooting 41% from three-point range, going up against the Central Connecticut team, in which they've got much more in the backcourt this year than they did a season ago. Kellen Amos is back after he had 13 points per contest, but Ellen Gene Rose, who was over at Fairfield season ago, he's been able to be a nice contributor, 19 points per contest. Overall for Central Connecticut, they are shooting just 26% from three-point range. That should be going northward. I have a little bit more concern down low for Central Connecticut. They don't have a single guy that's giving you north of 5 rebounds per game. Their top rebounder, Andre Sani, really did not get replaced in the offseason, so they've been looking at the center spot for Jaden Brown, who at 6'8", just doesn't give you a ton of rebounding to be able to take hold of that spot. Meanwhile, you do have a UMass team that down low, you've got Matt Cross, who's able to give you 8.5 rebounds. He had 6'7", fully capable of being a pop 3. He's currently shooting about 15% from 3. That'll be going very much northward as the season goes along. But on top of that, the NEC really player of the year last season from St. Francis of Pennsylvania, Josh Cohen. He should be able to do a great job as well in the post. 22 points, 8.3 boards. Not going to step out there and pop 3s, but really like his overall low post game. That should allow UMass to be able to dominate this one, which is why I did set them as a 12-point favorite. I like the way that Central Connecticut has rebuilt this program, but this just feels like a bad matchup in general with all the size that UMass brings to the table. Also did set my total 148. UMass looks to play up tempo, but again, when Frank Martin has a full amount of guys out there on the floor, his defense is able to be pretty stout. So looking at the under and going to be willing to lay with UMass. 306-563, 306-564. South Florida is going to be playing us Maine. Maine hopes to not get Mained as they are 10-point underdogs. Totals between 136 and 137. And with Maine, I did set them as an underdog of 6.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Maine. This team has Kellen Tynes in the backcourt, who last season was able to lead all of college basketball in terms of steals, as he was able to generate 3.3 steals per contest. This is not a team that's necessarily going to be able to go bombs away from three-point range, and the rebounding is a little bit suspect, but Peter Felpovsky last season was able to give the team right around 6 rebounds per contest, and they get to go up against the South Florida team that is pretty brand spanking new. As for South Florida, they do bring in the coach over at Kennesaw State, last season in Abdul Rahim, and he brought with him a trio of guys that were big contributors from Kennesaw State a season ago, with the top scorer being Chris Youngblood, 15.5 points per contest, and also from that same conference, you've got Jose Placer, who was over at North Florida, was their main trigger man, but has not really been able to take over the point guard duties because your main guy being able to go off the ball has actually been freshman Jaden Reed, who's been able to give you 4.7 assists per contest for an offense that has not turned the ball over a lot, about 11 turnovers per game. Right now, South Florida shooting just 26% from three-point range. That should be going northward. They've got far better guys than what they have shown thus far in terms of being able to bomb from the outside. You've got Sultan Miguel as well, who a season ago over at South Florida was able to shoot about 33.5% from three-point range with 10.5 points per game. Do like what he's able to bring to the table as well, but you don't necessarily have ideal size with the South Florida team. With Maine, typically they get exposed down low, but Kristen Firebergs being able to give you 5.5 rebounds per game, that should be able to hold up in this one and allow Maine to stay close and be able to generate a few turnovers against a South Florida team with a lot of moving parts. So I did set my line at 6.5. I'm going to be one to take the points, and with regards to the total, set mine at a 142.5. South Florida looking to play a little bit more up-tempo under this new style, and Maine has certainly been cranking up their tempo as well. So looking at the over and going to be willing to take the points with Maine 3 of 6.565, 3 of 6.566. Notre Dame is going to be playing us Maryland Eastern Shore. This Shore is between a 12 to a 13-point underdog. So it's between 133 and 134.5. With the Shore, I did make them an underdog of 15 points. So I am actually going to be willing to lay it with Notre Dame. Notre Dame is just a really well-coached team in general that I do feel like they're starting to be able to find it under Micah Shrewsbury. The team certainly doesn't have a ton of talent, but now they get to go up against a Maryland Eastern Shore team that is a very much brand new look team that replaces darn near everything from a season ago. Sans Chase Davis, he was able to give the team a double-figure amount of points a season ago. He's been able to chip in there 13.5 points per contest, shooting about 37.5% from three-point range this season. So he's someone that the team is able to piggyback off of, though. He was really the only guy in that backcourt a season ago that didn't generate a lot of steals, and that was the calling card of Maryland Eastern Shore the last few seasons. They have a little bit more down low with Troy Hupstead, who's been able to give you 10 rebounds per game, as Maryland Eastern Shore only had like one guy give you north of 4 rebounds per game each of the last 2 seasons, but the overall versatility of Notre Dame, I think, is going to be able to take hold. You've got Marcus Burton, who's been able to do a nice job with 19.5 points, 3.5 boards, 2.5 assists, at 5'11", who's been able to do a nice job of just getting better and better at with every passing game. Had 20 big points in that overtime win over Oklahoma State. Julian Roper comes in from Northwestern and has been able to do a solid job as each of your top 5 scorers for this Notre Dame team. As a matter of fact, they have been able to pull in there at least 4.5 rebounds per game. They don't necessarily have that one true low post presence, so Kerry Booth does have 6'11" size, but with Notre Dame, they are going to see a little bit of rise in their currently 22.5% three-point shooting. Booth is the only guy, by the way, on the team that's currently shooting 28.5% from three-point range. This has just been a rough shooting team in general. Things should be going a little bit more northward, and I do think that it's going to be a rough year for them from the outside, but someone like a J.R. Kozensky, who comes in as a junior from being just pretty much glued to the bench a season ago, I do think that he's going to be able to rise up just a little bit. I do think that you're going to have Burton be able to knock down a few more threes as well for this Maryland Eastern Shore team. It's just not the same defense that we've seen in past years, as against D1 competition, they have allowed 80-plus points in every one of their games this far this season, and for Notre Dame, they're very much taking on a slow defensive style as well, so it's a good old situation of something's got to give. I did set my total at a 135. I think that here at 133 to 134.5, just a little bit too low. I think that both of these teams going to be able to knock down some shots. I'm going to be taking a look at the over, and with Notre Dame, going to be willing to lay up to 14.5 with them. 3 of 6.567, 3 of 6.568. St. Bonaventure is playing against Bucknell. Bucknell is an underdog of 17 points, and your total on this game are between 133 and 133.5. With Bucknell, did set them at 16-point underdogs. So here at 17, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Bucknell. This bunch has been really in a lot of transition with John Griffin, a former legend of the Bucknell program, taking over, and they have been looking at Jack Forrest really being that main guy in the backcourt. He comes in from St. Joe's. He's been able to give you about 16 points per contest and is currently shooting about 45% from three-point range, chipping in there about 6.5 rebounds per game, and they have to go up against the St. Bonaventure team that is one of the most experienced teams in all of college basketball. You've got so many guys in the backcourt like Darrell Banks, Micah Adams-Woods that have sort of been there, done that, and you don't necessarily have that one primary scorer with St. Bonaventure. You've got 5 guys averaging between 8.5 and 12.3 points per contest. You've got the artist formerly known as Jan Farrell, Asa Asamvias, hopefully I said that correctly, who's been able to give you about 9.5 points, 4.5 boards. Last season at 6'6", was able to shoot north of 40% from 3-point range, but I do think that he's going to be able to rise up. Kyrell Lucha's taken a little bit of a backseat this season, so they've got good depth, but I do think that the 7-footer Noah Williamson is going to be able to keep Bucknell in this game. He's been able to log about 11.5 points, 7 boards. We've got a Bucknell team that in general has been turning the ball over too much with right around 14 turnovers per game. This is a backcourt very much in transition, and it's just been a little bit of disappointment when we've seen out of Josh Ado this far this season. He's only been able to give the team in the neighborhood of about 4 points per contest. Season ago, shot 39% from 3-point range. Looked like he was going to be a nice outside force for the team. Has yet to be able to do a whole heck of a lot, but with Bucknell, they're able to do a relatively solid job with the size that they do have, and I do think that that is going to be able to make this a little bit more of a competitive game. And Bucknell, they certainly have been going much slower with their tempo this season, but they certainly do have some holes with their defense, and this is the St. Bonaventure team that they themselves have had a little bit of a rough time with their defense, giving up 69 plus in 3 out of their first 4 games. So I'm going to be taking a look at the over. I did set my total at a 136. I think that John Griffin wants his team to run a little bit more. I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Bucknell, 306, 569, 306, 570. It is South Carolina State. They are going to be on the road facing off against Missouri. Missouri is between a 25 to a 26-point favorite. Total on this game, it is between a 153.5 and 154. I did set Missouri as a 27.5 point favorite. Now, the last time Missouri was right around this big of a favorite, they lost outright, but I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a different circumstance. You've got yourself a South Carolina State team that's in a lot of transition because they lose their main 3-point shooting from a season ago. Not having Lusan Holmes and company, I think, is going to be hurting them. Davion Everett down low is someone that's able to give you right around 7 rebounds per game, so there's a little bit of encouragement there, but I do think that for Missouri, you're going to be able to get much more in the post out of Connor Vanover, the 7'5" gentleman that comes in from Oral Roberts. He's able to pop threes. He lends very good versatility in general, and I do think that that is going to be a big helper for Missouri. They have not really featured him too much ever since he has come off of suspension, and I do think that he's going to be working his way back in the fold. Meanwhile, for Missouri, you still have a very dynamic backcourt with this team as well. Sean East is able to give you in the neighborhood of about 14 points per contest. You've got Nick Honor, who's currently shooting 46.5% from 3, and Missouri as a whole shooting about 34.5% from 3. The top guys have been amazing from 3. The bottom guys have been absolutely horrible. I do think that that's going to be ironing out just a little bit, but Caleb Grill also gives this team a lot more defense, as Missouri last year was well outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They have been quite a bit better thus far this season. Meanwhile, for South Carolina State, this team has been having a tough time being able to get things going, losing to 17 by Samford and 20 by Tulsa. That's not necessarily a really good look for this team. Been able to get about 17 points per contest out of Mitchell Taylor, who's been a very nice helper for this team. And Omar Croxley is able to give you about 10.5 points per contest, and pretty much one of the few guys on the roster is able to shoot north of 30% per 3-point range. That's contributing more than 6 points per contest, as South Carolina State 17.5 turnovers per contest, shooting 25% from 3. Missouri not generating as many steals as they were a season ago, but I do think that they're going to be able to exploit that and be able to get a pretty convincing win. I did set Missouri as a favorite of 27.5 points. I'm going to be one to lay this number, and I do think that things get cranked up tempo. We have been seeing South Carolina State playing at one of the fastest tempos in all of college basketball last few seasons, so going to be taking a look at the over, and I'm going to be one to lay it with Missouri. 306-571, 306-572. Queens is going to be playing us to Fairleigh Dickinson. Old Queens NC finds themselves as favorites of 5.5 points. Totals anywhere between 152 and 153. I made Queens a 4.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take 5+ here with Fairleigh Dickinson. Fairleigh Dickinson, once again, going to be a little bit outgunned down low, as they are in pretty much every game. They are one of the shortest teams in all of college basketball, but with this Fairleigh Dickinson team, you do have still quite a few of the guys that were on that bunch that was able to make the run in the NCAA tournament a season ago. Ansley Almoner is back after he was able to give the team a double-figure amount of points per game. You still have guys that are able to get down low. They're able to give you a little bit of rebounding to help out against the Queens NC team that they are still dealing with the injury to their main rebounder from a season ago, as well as you were able to get right in the neighborhood about 10.5 rebounds per game, in the neighborhood about 6.5 points out of Gavin Raines, that he still has not been able to take the floor after he got injured towards the back half of last season. When it comes to Queens, this team plays a very up-tempo style, much like Fairleigh Dickinson, which is why I did set my total more around about a 155.5. This is going to be a spot in which I'm going to be taking a look at the over on, because I do think that Fairleigh Dickinson going to be able to take it to a Queens NC team that has been one of the most brutal with regards to their perimeter defense over the last few seasons, and I do think that with Sean Moore being able to just give you more in general, 8 points, 7 boards, steal per contest, be that versatile do-it-all player for Fairleigh Dickinson, them being able to shoot as a collective about 37% from 3-point range, with Joe Munden Jr. chipping in their double figures, and having a little bit more this year out of Sebastian Lamouté, who a season ago was a little bit of an afterthought after as a freshman, was shooting about 35.5% from three. That's going to be paramount, especially against the Queens NC team that you do have a nice duo in DJ McLaurin along with AJ McKee, who are back from a season ago. Both of these guys are able to shoot about 35 to 36% from three. McLaurin, 6.5 boards, 10.5 points per contest. McKee has been able to chip in there right around 17.5 points per game as well. So this is going to be a circumstance where I'm going to be willing to dive in on Fairleigh Dickinson, being able to get 5 or more. I'm in on them, and I do think that you get a nice up and down game. Going to be taking a look at the over to go along with Fairleigh Dickinson. 306-573, 306-574. Sam Amford is playing us to Alabama State. Alabama State anywhere between a 15.5 to a 16-point underdog, and your total is between 149 and 150. And with Alabama State, I did set them as an underdog of 19 points, so I'm going to be one to lay it. Samford certainly has their numbers looking a little bit strange as far as this season after they got completely pulverized by Purdue, but I do think that they are really working their way back as they've got someone in Jermaine Marshall, who's a 6'6" guy that's able to do a nice job last season, 14 points, 8 boards per contest, is able to pop a few threes, and it's just a case where Alabama State, I don't think, is going to be able to match up with that. You've got essentially Madlock squared for this team. You've got Tony Madlock and his son TJ Madlock, with his son TJ being the team leader in darn near everything thus far this season. He's been able to log 16.5 points, pulling in there 5.8 rebounds, 3.5 assists per contest. And for Samford, I think that if they can just get Ryland Jones clicking and just online with this team, it's good to be able to lead them to be a very efficient bunch, as he had a little bit of a tough go of it first few games of the season, but if you recall what he was able to do at Utah, he was able to be a 4+ assists per game guy, as well. He's been a relatively solid shooter as well, even though he doesn't necessarily look to shoot. You've got a Samford team that they're at their best when they're generating a bunch of turnovers, and they've been able to get about 13 steals per contest. Bit of an asterisk there. Most of those have come against their non-D1 competition. They shoot a little bit better than 27% from three. They're not an amazing three-point shooting team, but they are far better than what they've shown thus far this season. Then you've got AJ Stanton McCray, someone who I've liked for the last few seasons. He, as a freshman, averaged about 10 points per contest, has seen a little bit of a fall off in recent years, but at 6'5", he's able to give you right around 3.5 rebounds per contest. And for Alabama State, you just don't have anyone that's able to match up down low, and Madlock is your main rebounder. They do bring in Deontay Bass. He comes in from Georgetown, and in his 2 games played has been able to give you about 8 rebounds per contest, so he does elevate the team a little bit and should be good to go after dealing with a bit of a early season injury. But we've also got an Alabama State team that shooting about 37.5% from the floor. They were towards the bottom of all of college basketball in terms of their shooting percentage as well, and I do think that Samford is going to make life miserable for an Alabama State team that has to have Madlock do pretty much everything for them. So I did set this total at 153. Looking at the over, I think that Samford going to want to crank things up tempo, and with Samford willing to lay up to 18.5 with them. 306-575, 306-576. Incarnate Word is going to be playing us to Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State, a 3.5 to a 4-point favorite. Your total is between 143 and 144.5, and with Jacksonville State, I did set them as an underdog of 5.5 points. I really don't understand why Jacksonville State is the favorite, so I'm going to be taking a look at Incarnate Word outright on the money line. With this Incarnate Word bunch, I actually like what I've seen out of the backcourt a little bit this year. Joshua Morgan has been in the program for a very long time, has always been a high 33-point shooter. He is a hit or miss guy. One night he'll give you 15 points, the next night he'll give you like 3, but Sky Wicks as well. He has been a nice takeover player, 22.5 points, 8.5 boards, shooting 43.5% from 3-point range, has been able to contribute 15-plus points in every game that he has played in thus far this season. Now, the big thing for Incarnate Word is that they are going to be looking to just continue this offense that has been very much reformed. 71-plus points in each of their last 3 games, going up against the Jacksonville State team that typically they shoot it really well from 3-point range, but have a tough time taking care of the ball. Thus far this season, they're shooting 33% from the outside. That should jump a little bit, but 15.5 turnovers per game. That has been an issue. Kai Tandy has come in for about 15.5 points per contest after he was at Xavier last season. Quincy Clark was a primary reserve of Lipscomb a season ago, 5.5 points per game, but he's not really an outside force either. Juwan Purdue has been the main guy down low for this Jacksonville State team, but they don't really have a lot of depth either. I think that they're going to need to get quite a bit more moving forward. Travis Roberts, who a season ago I liked him. He shot 41.5% from 3, didn't really score a lot, but has yet to be able to take that leap forward for Jacksonville State. They're just trying to find their bearings in general with Clark having to be the floor general out there, and that's led to a lot of turnovers. I think that Incarnate Word going to be able to take advantage of that sloppy play with their improved offense and be able to get it done here. I'm looking at Incarnate Word outright on the money line, and with regards to the total, did set it out at 143.5. You've got a Jacksonville State team that is not very efficient on defense, but they should be seeing a rise in their three-point shooting percentage. So you're at a 143. I'm going to be taking a look at the over, and I am going to be taking a look at Incarnate Word outright on the money line. 306.577, 306.578. It is Alcorn State hitting the road to face off against UT Arlington. UT Arlington is a favorite of 10 points, and your total is 147.5. With Alcorn State, I did set them as an underdog of 10.5 points. 10 is the absolute max I'm going to be willing to lay on this one, but I'm going to be willing to lay it with UT Arlington. They are looking to crank up the tempo just a little bit from last season. Last season, this bunch was just really trying to stick you in the mud. They were looking to play very slow, very controlled. This season, you can tell that UT Arlington taking a little bit more of a backcourt approach. They've been able to get nice numbers out of Shamar Wilson down low, much like he did a season ago. He's up to right around 16 points per contest, but you've been able to get quite a bit out of the backcourt with right around 9 points, 3 assists, 42% three-point shooting out of Makai Williams. Couple that with what you've been able to get out of Brandon Talbot, who's been able to do a nice job doling out about 3.5 assists per contest. You've got DeJuan Gordon averaging a double-double, 13 points, 10 boards, stealing half per contest for Arlington. They are still averaging about 14.5 to 15 turnovers per game. They're going to need to clean that up a little bit, but I did think that Fabio Basili, who comes in from Louisville, is going to be able to make a little bit of an impact. Wasn't necessarily a primary player over at Louisville a season ago, but was someone that was a former top 250 recruit, and you also need Aaron Cash, who's only been able to give you right around 3 points per contest to be able to step up as well. This is an Alcorn State team that has been able to have Jeremiah Kendall just play out of his mind right now, 18.5 points, 10 boards, but he is the only guy on the roster currently giving you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. This is an Alcorn State team that always struggles with their three-point shooting as well. Jeremiah Gendrell along with Jaquan Thorne have both been able to shoot north of 43% from three-point range, but pretty much everyone else on the roster that has attempted at least 3 threes this year is shooting below 10% from 3. So that's a little bit of an issue, and it's a very random Alcorn State team. They bring in Jalen Hawkins, who I still remember he was a double-figure scorer over at Norfolk State a few seasons ago, and it's a well-put-together Alcorn State team, but I do think that with UT Arlington, having what they do down low, with them being able to add a little bit more three-point shooting, they do get it done in this circumstance. I did set Alcorn State as a 10.5 point underdog, so we'll take Arlington at 10 or less, and with this total, did set it at a 144.5. Alcorn State, very inconsistent with their scoring, and UT Arlington still looking to play under a little bit of a reformed system as well. So going to be taking a look at the under, and UT Arlington laying the number 306.579, 306.580. Kansas State is going to be playing us to Central Arkansas. Central Arkansas is an underdog of between 23 to 26.5 points. Your total staying between 153 and 154, and with Central Arkansas, set them as a 24-point underdog. Being able to get 25.5 to 26.5, I'm going to be willing to take the points. With Kansas State, just doesn't feel quite like the same team from a season ago. Naquan Tomlin being suspended, that certainly does hurt this backcourt. You've had Tyler Perry be able to go off for 19 points per contest. He's showing exactly the flashes that he did over at North Texas a season ago, shooting about 38% from three-point range. To be able to pull in their 5.5 boards, 4.8 assists per contest, and Arthur Kaluma is starting to pick it up as well after a little bit of a slow start to the season. He had a big double-double in that game against Miami. Still not necessarily sold on him, though. He's 6'7", and it just feels like he does everything okay, doesn't really do anything great. David Ngussen has been able to give you right in the neighborhood about 8 rebounds per game as well. And then for Central Arkansas, they've been dealing with an injury to their primary scorer in Cameron Hunter, but Elias Cato has done a nice job stepping up, shooting 37.5% from 3, 15 points, 6 boards, chipping in there a block and a steal per contest as well. So nice versatility out of him. Masai Alawerke a season ago had right around 9 points, 5 boards, like what he's able to bring to the table. And then you've also got Ogbasi Itam, who's a 6'9" gentleman that has come in and has been able to do a very nice job, be able to log right around 9 boards per contest. He was over at Bowling Green last season where he was able to see a few starts for them, really didn't see any significant minutes. He was out there for pretty much a tip and absolutely nothing else. But with the Central Arkansas team, you know that they're going to be willing to run. That is just their MO. They've done a good job of cutting down on the turnovers just a little bit from season ago. Three-point shooting has been a little bit sporadic and all over the place, but they have found some pretty good depth in terms of guys being able to give the team right around about 7 to 8 points per game. Ian Clintman has been able to do a solid job of being able to put in there some scoring as well. So I do think that this number, a little bit out of whack with Kansas State, still dealing with their injury to Quez Glover as well. Set my line at 24, going to be taking the points with Central Arkansas. Do think that this game gets cranked up tempo. Set my total at 158, so also going to be taking a look at the over. Final two games are out there in the Cancun Challenge. 306-581, 306-582. Chicago State and Morgan State to battle from Hard Rock Arena. No numbers currently up on this game, but with Chicago State, did set them as a 2-point favorite. Morgan State, I believe, has a little bit more talent in this game, but the problem for Morgan State is they've got a lot of moving pieces from a season ago, so they're still trying to find their bearings. And on top of that, you've got a player in Miles Thompson that did not play at all last season as well. Very good, versatile player from St. Francis of Pennsylvania 2 seasons ago that was putting in their 41% from 3, 11 points, 3.5 boards as a 6'7", sort of do-it-all sort of player. You've been able to get a little bit of rebounding out of Christian Oliver with right around 5 boards per contest as well. And then last season, Cameron Hobbs shot well above 40% from 3-point range, but with Morgan State and all these pieces trying to come together, it's led to north of 16 turnovers per contest. Meanwhile, Chicago State, not that they do the world's greatest job of taking care of the ball, but less than 13 turnovers for them. They entered into the tournament shooting about 24% from 3-point range. That should be going northward, but Deshaun Corbett along Wesley Cardet, these two guys have been absolutely incredible. 1-2 punch with about 30.5 points, 13.5 rebounds. Neither guy is necessarily an amazing 3-point shooter or anything like that, but that's why you've got Noble Crawford coming in from LIU. Has yet to be able to give you a ton of scoring, but he's up to right around about 3 boards per contest. With every passing game, he has been trusted more and more by this team, and he's been contributing more and more. 6'5" weapon that I think can be really able to help this team moving forward. Then you've got Kendrick Green back from a season ago. He's been able to give you about 7 points per contest last season. Shot 38% from 3-point range. Had a little bit of a cold start from the outside, but I do think that he's going to be able to pick it up as well. Morgan State has been one of the fastest teams in all of college basketball over the last few seasons. You've got a Chicago State team that's actually played very slowly, so got a little bit of battle with tempos. I did set this line at 2, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 1.5 with Chicago State, 2.5 or more. Going to be taking a look at the points with Morgan State, and then 143.5 or less. Looking at the over 144.5 or higher to the under 306-583, 306-584 is how we wrap it up. Northern Colorado is going to be playing against Radford. No numbers up on this game, but I set Radford as a 6.5-point favorite, so willing to lay up to 6 with them. 7 or more, taking a look at Northern Colorado, and then 140 or less, going to be taking a look at the over 141 or higher. I'm going to be diving in on the under with this Northern Colorado bunch. It's very much new look from a season ago because you do have to replace Dalton Connect and company, but what I do like about them is that you've got a lot of versatility in general. With Northern Colorado, you're not going to have that one guy absolutely take over the game like they've had the last few seasons, but someone like a Riley Abercrombie. He needs Fitch, but at 6'9", he's able to shoot for his career about 36% from 3-point range. If there is one guy that could be really getting into his untapped potential, it is St. Thomas, who, he just completely flopped over at Loyola Chicago last season, but all of a sudden he's become a double-double machine for the team. He's actually had a double-double in now 4 straight games, has been able to log about 14 points, just under 12 rebounds. He's giving you a steal and a half per contest. Not a guy that's going to go out there and shoot threes, and Northern Colorado, typically a very good 3-point shooting team, is shooting less than 32% from the outside, but they're still taking care of the ball, going up against a Radford team that they do pride themselves on steals. Byron Antoine, along Keenan Giles, and DeQuan Smith are able to combine for about 4.5 steals per contest. With Antoine, he's been able to shoot about 40% from 3-point range. Smith and Giles are combining for about 30 or so points per contest. You don't necessarily have a ton of depth down low, but Justin Archer has been able to give you right around 9 rebounds per game as well. And then I do think you're going to be able to see moving forward a little bit more out of Chandler Turner, the gentleman that comes in from Bowling Green. He had a nice 17.8 rebound performance against Morgan State last season at Bowling Green. Right around 5.5 boards, 9 points per contest. Like the way that he's able to just operate down low. That takes the pressure off of Archer a little bit as well and gives the team another option in the post. And then on top of that, I do think that you're going to get a little bit more out of Truth Harris, who's got an absolutely incredible name, comes in from ETSU. Thus far this season has been able to give you about 6 points per contest. When I was over at ETSU, was a 40% 3-point shooter. So it is a spot where at 140 or less, looking at the over 141 or higher to the under Northern Colorado. A little bit more efficient with their defense, less efficient with their offense right now. And with Radford, we'll lay up to 6 with them, 7 or more. I'm going to be taking the points with Northern Colorado, and that will wrap things up for the Wednesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @JNet_D1. Keep in mind that it's CM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast. Find that 5-star review coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. And big thanks to Curtis Rogers for joining me in the last segment as well. And I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.